very good morning to you, and welcome to the Lucia House of Assembly, where the Senate, the upper house, will be meeting today to debate and hopefully go through all the stages in a motion that was brought before the House of Assembly on Tuesday when the House met to debate a motion by the Honorable Prime Minister, and that motion was to borrow the sum of, I must get this right, of just about $102 million. That was when we last met on Tuesday, and that motion is before us here today. We also have a motion by the Honorable Leader of Government Business and the Minister of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, and it says here, oh yes, that's it, $128,294 United States dollars from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023. The loan is repayable in 20 years, commencing from the date of first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. The loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date the first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. Interest is payable at a rate of the 6-month Chicago Mercantile Exchange term secured overnight financing rate plus 0.2% and 1.25% per annum. If the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the amount of United States $3,404, except that the first or the last principal installment must be in the amount of $3,404,261. Also down here, that bill, the bill for virtual asset business, which went through all the stages at the sitting of the lower house on Tuesday, will also come up for debate here. So that's it, a motion to borrow $102 million from the Export-Import Bank of China, and a bill, the virtual asset business bill, to be debated here in the Senate today. With me is Michael Gaspar to bring you up on the latest in Creole.
Merci Winston. Bonjour Sainte-Lucie, bonjour tout le monde qui a regardé station télévision NTN. Nous en Caille aujourd'hui, c'est Caille Parlement, avec aujourd'hui Sénat là, ça c'est l'autre chambre, branche du gouvernement, ça c'est mon qui a pointé à Premier ministre avec face à l'opposition, avec aussi le gouverneur général. Excusez-moi, qu'à joindre pour discuter, enfin, pour savoir qu'à ratifier, pour supporter ça, l'autre chambre qui constitue le Parlement qui était joint mardi pour discuter loan, c'est l'argent que le gouvernement a prêté pour Banque Exim, ça c'est Import-Export Bank, ça c'est Exim Bank en Taïwan, qui a prêté au gouvernement un loan en valeur, enfin, admettez ici, il a venu $277 millions. Oui, ça c'est l'argent comme Premier ministre a dit mardi, qui a servi pour assister à différents projets en gouvernement. Avec ça, c'est l'argent qui Premier ministre a dit a annoncé un budget qui a besoin, c'est l'argent ça là pour assister avec différents projets, pour payer dettes, et qui en a c'est là nous aussi apprendre. C'est qui l'argent ça là qui est payé pour chaque gouvernement déjà un point en temps passé pour faire différents projets. L'argent ça qui est servi pour payer chaque gouvernement doit l'argent ça là qui est servi pour payer qui est aussi servi pour bâtir différents qualités projets physiques comme d'autres ministres gros projets qui est aussi servi pour assister particulièrement après Covid, la chaque dépense gouvernementale après maladie et bien épidémie Covid là, le gouvernement a prend loan ça et aussi pour ça il a créé recurrent expenditure veut dire l'argent gouvernement ni pour dépenser tout l'argent qu'on pour payer utilité, l'argent pour loyer, il a loué différentes places, l'argent pour payer servants civils, police, tout ces monde là qui si ça recurrent expenditure, c'est en l'argent pour payer tous les mois et bien tous les années, c'est normal. So l'argent c'est là qui a discuté Adam motion ça là, ça c'est Sénat là qui fait ça aujourd'hui avec aussi l'année en bill comme Winston d'Italia et un bill virtual asset. Bien, oui, c'est virtual asset business. Ça c'est un bill, il pas de discussion à tout. Il n'y a pas de discussion à ce cas considéré parlement m'a dit parler à ce nous parler à cas espérer il y a une discussion à ce ça. Et ça c'est plutôt motion qui a une plus discussion aujourd'hui. Comme peut-être vous savez ça, nous j'en ici déjà comme nous avons préparé pour commencer à discuter n'importe le moment nous supposons ça c'est président Sénat là, ça c'est sénateur Alvin Reynolds qui a apprenti dernière session il a apprenti comme président Sénat là avec déjà nous avons l'année 3 4 à ce façade gouvernement, ça c'est chef façade gouvernement c'est sénateur Goubian Ferdinand qui aussi c'est secrétaire parlement un ministre tourisme là aussi nous sénateur Pauline Antoine ici aussi et aussi c'est on pas dit même parlement, c'est secrétaire parlement, un ministre éducation, mais aussi l'autre, ça c'est sénateur Kejiana Chalry, Toussaint, ici à président aussi à ce façade gouvernement. L'année aussi, nous avons sénateur Alison Jean, c'est INEF. Avec Issa Winston tout à l'heure, là aussi des sénateurs indépendants avec une face à ce face à l'opposition. Winston?
Yes, approaching the chamber at the moment is the President of the Senate, Senator Alvin Reynolds.
Let us pray. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thy unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the King, the public weal, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Good morning, Senators. I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following motion and bill were passed in the House of Assembly and forwarded to the Senate for its concurrence. Public Finance Management Act Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023 and the virtual asset business. I beg to announce that His Excellency the Governor General has been pleased to assent the following bill: St. Jude Hospital Amendment. I wish to welcome back two of our senators to St. Lucia, back home, the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, and Leader of Government Business, and Senator Lisa Joahir, who both traveled on Parliament business. The Leader of Government Business attended a fully funded World Trade Organization and Inter-Parliamentary Union workshop for Latin American and the Caribbean parliamentarians at the National Congress of Argentina on behalf of the Parliament. The workshop took place on 20th and 29th November 2022 under the theme Addressing Trade Challenges, the Contribution of Latin American and the Caribbean Parliamentarians. Senator Lisa Joahir attended the 19th Parliamericas Plenary Assembly and the 14th gathering of the Parliamentary Network for Gender Equality, which took place in Bogota, Colombia, from November 30th to December 2nd, 2022. The senators will brief us on these sessions. On Monday, the staff of the Parliament decked out in orange attire to support the 16 days of activism under the theme Gender-Based Violence. The annual international campaign began on 25th November, which is known as International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and it culminates on December 10th, which is observed as Human Rights Day. As part of the observation of Human Rights Day, I will be participating in a live discussion under the theme Enhancing Equality and Countering Discrimination, a celebration of Human Rights Day in St. Lucia. This is to be held on Friday, December 9th, that's tomorrow, 2022, at the NCN Studios from 3 to 4 p.m. This is organized by United and Strong in collaboration with the International Institute on Race, Equality and Human Rights, and the Office of the General Secretariat of the OAS. I would like to announce that the International Day of Persons with Disabilities 2022 was observed on December 3rd, 2022. Please find a copy of statements from the chairperson of the Commonwealth Parliamentarians with Disabilities Network, Honorable Laura Kanushu, let me get that right, the MP. I wish to also report that Mrs. Esmeline Cox Jean-Louis, Acting Clerk, and Ms. Nita Louis, Acting Administrative Secretary, are attending a Public Accounts Committee workshop for clerks and officials hosted by the CPA UK. We wish them well in their deliberations. I would like to also inform senators that the Office of Parliament will be collecting monetary donations and household items in order to help a needy family this year's end. I implore senators to contribute to this worthy cause. A box for monetary contributions and a box for non-perishable items have been organized downstairs, so feel free to be generous, senators. Also today, very importantly, our clerk in-house with us, Clerk Madam Sharon Montour, is celebrating her special day. Today is her birthday, and I'm sure all of us would like to wish her a very happy birthday. Statements from ministers. Now we move on to appointment of sessional committees. In consultation with the leader of government business, the decision was made that Madam President would follow in the footsteps of our former president to head the following committees: the Standing Order Committee, the House Committee, and the Committee of Privileges. And therefore, Senator Alison Jean will take the place of former Senator Reynolds and be part of the Standing Order Committee and the Regulations Committee. Am I right, Senator, Leader of Government Business? Thank you, Senator. At some point during the day, all senators will receive a copy of all members of the committees. Thank you very much, senators. Papers to be laid. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning. I will save the courtesies before the motion is moved, so I will move on with the papers to be laid. Madam President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument number 158 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Bellpool Incorporated Order. Statutory Instrument number 159 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentive, Elijah Hunt Order. Statutory Instrument number 160 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentive, Golden Eggs Farms Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 161 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Gregory Mangru Order. Statutory Instrument number 162 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Innocent Solomon Order. Statutory Instrument number 163 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, LA Farms Inc. Order. Statutory Instrument number 164 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Loretta Robinson Order. Statutory Instrument number 165 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Mikey K. Prescott Order. Statutory Instrument number 166 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Richard Lafay Order. Statutory Instrument number 168 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Black Bay Farmers and Consumers Cooperative Society Order. Statutory Instrument number 169 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Claudia Martley Janke Order. Statutory Instrument number 170 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Darius Pierre Order. Statutory Instrument number 171 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Dorcas Tyrus Order. Statutory Instrument number 172 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Edison St. Rose and Rupert Fevrier Order. Statutory Instrument number 173 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Emil W. Sagusin Order. Statutory Instrument number 174 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Kingsley B. Samuel Order. Statutory Instrument number 175 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Ronald K. John Order. Statutory Instrument number 176 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Herbert William Order. Statutory Instrument number 174 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Anthony H. Yodovic Order. Salutary Instrument Number 178 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Anthony Paul Order. Salutary Instrument Number 179 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Cuthbert Joseph Order. Salutary Instrument Number 180 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Dillett B. Isaac Johannes Order. Salutary Instrument Number 181 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Edwin Joseph Order. Salutary Instrument Number 182 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Eldrana Augustine Daniel Order. Salutary Instrument Number 183 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Gerald Cyril Order. Salutary Instrument Number 184 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Ianola Apiculture Collective Order. Salutary Instrument Number 185 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentive, John Ricardo James Order. Salutary Instrument Number 186 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Josiah Castang Order. Salutary Instrument Number 187 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Keith Mondesi Order. Salutary Instrument Number 188 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Lennon Prosper Order. Salutary Instrument Number 189 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Lisa Dubois Order. Salutary Instrument Number 190 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Lucille Alexander Order. Salutary Instrument Number 191 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, McKenny Gonzague Order. Salutary Instrument Number 192 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Nyson K. Bassett Order. Salutary Instrument Number 193 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Superior Fish and Seafood Suppliers Limited Order. Salutary Instrument Number 194 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Tyron Janke Order. Salutary Instrument Number 195 of 2022, Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives, Wayne Thomas Order. Salutary Instrument Number 196 of 2022, Legal Profession, Eligibility, Kesia Akita Ellis Bourne Order. Salutary Instrument Number 197 of 2022, to resume stimulus and investment, Intercopter Hospitality Limited Order. Salutary Instrument Number 198 of 2022, Price Control Amendment, Number 21 Order. Salutary Instrument Number 199 of 2022, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 16 Order.
Giving you a moment to breathe, Senator. Motions.
Thank you for the breathing space, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to lay the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 63(1) of the Public Finance Management Act Number 14 of 2020, the Act that the Minister of Finance may, by an affirmative resolution of Parliament, borrow from a bank or other financial institution for the capital or current expenditure of government. And whereas it is provided by Section 64 of the Act that money borrowed by the government must be paid into and form part of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow of a sum of US $128,294 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023. And whereas the loan is repayable in 20 years, commencing from the date of the first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. And whereas the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date the first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. And whereas interest is payable at a rate of the 6 months Chicago Mercantile Exchange Term Secured Overnight Financing Rate plus 0.2% and 1% and 1.25% per annum, And whereas, if the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, equal principal installments must be in the amount of US $3,404,277, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,261. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of US $102,128,294 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable in 20 years commencing from the date of the first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. B, the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive, equal or as nearly equal as possible, semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date the first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. C, interest is payable at a rate of 6-month Chicago Mercantile Exchange Term Secured Overnight Financing Rate plus 0.2% and 1.25% per annum. D, if the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the sum of US $3,404,277, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,261.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Sarge. Thank you, Madam President, for your patience. This morning the workload is heavy, so I have to take my time. Madam President, before I proceed with an explanation on the motion, I wish to beg your leave to first of all express condolences to the opposition colleagues of mine who are here on the passing of their colleague Norbert Williams, and wish them well, and his family and his loved ones well. Madam President, I also wish to take the opportunity to wish our clerk a happy birthday and God's peace and blessings. I hope she reduces the age after each birthday, while the numbers grow, that the health and the wealth may multiply. Madam President, just by way of informing the Senate, you did mention earlier of the representation that was made by two of us on behalf of the Parliament. I want to just highlight a couple of important issues that were noted. I have presented the Mr. Speaker, and via email you will also receive a copy of a report that I have prepared for the purpose of the reporting on what happened on the trip. First of all, Madam President, there were three main issues that were highlighted, and they were three global issues that almost all of the Latin America, Caribbean, and our global partners have noted. And these three issues were: one, climate change; two, health, particularly public health; and three, peace. These were the three issues that were deemed to be confronting us today that all countries need to take heed of. Closer to home, the issues that were more relevant to the region and more directly affecting us at this time were mainly inflation, and they were in order of priority: food security, e-commerce and digitization, and the environment. These were the issues that all parliaments in the region felt that were issues that governments of the region and legislature in the region need to pay attention to in terms of their policy. And Madam President, I am pleased to inform the Senate that upon reflection, I realized after the 2 days of consultation that our government and this country is on target in terms of the priorities and the policies that we are now addressing. In fact, during one of the presentations, I was able to report on one of the bills that we just passed in the last sitting through the Ministry of Commerce, the Consumer Small Business Enterprise, and a few others that have been targeted to address these very issues. So I think that as a country, we are on target and very consistent with what is confronting us. So, Madam President, if I may now proceed to provide some measure of explanation for the motion before us, which is to authorize the Minister for Finance to borrow around 102 million US for various purposes. Mainly, Madam President, this funding is really targeted to support the budget. And it was very well articulated from the time that we passed the budget earlier this year, both in the estimates debate as well as the Prime Minister's policy statement in his address to the Parliament, that these monies at some point would have to be borrowed to finance the budget. I also believe that there were specific categories that were identified as to what these monies would be for. And just by way of example, I wish to highlight a few of them. Recurrent expenditure, capital expenditure, DFCs, land acquisition, payables, that is providing, paying people that we owe, and a number of other cash flow issues that are outstanding and need to be settled. But Madam President, I just want to go further with all of the various examples I've given. Just want to expound a little bit on the context and why it is necessary for us to address these as soon as possible. First of all, Madam President, on the issue of DFCs. Now, this word has been mentioned a few times, but I think it's important for the benefit of those listening and viewing to really get an appreciation of what we mean when we talk about DFCs. The acronym really refers to design, finance, and construct. But for someone who doesn't have the technical knowledge, and I may want to throw in some Creole, DFC, c'est carrément dit l'argent ou doit moun. L'argent qui a servi pour faire travail, mais le gouvernement n'a pas payé pour travail là, et puis après travail là fini, on est pour joindre l'argent pour payer moun. So the DFCs really is one of the areas that we have recognized getting into government that is extremely, extremely high. And there is a lot of debt that was incurred that need to be accounted for and paid. They may not have been on the books because they probably were not in the estimates, but because work has been done, people are owed, we have to pay them. There is an estimated amount of about 112 million that is owed in DFCs only. And I think that is a significant sum of money that we now have to find to pay those we owe, quote unquote. Madam President, it is important to note that these DFCs are not costs that were incurred by the current government. These are costs and debts that we found when we came in, but as a responsible government, we will not deny anybody of the monies that we owe them. I think I remembered in 2016, persons worked before elections, and some of them received their monies a year later, and the interest rate took all the monies away, and some are yet to be paid. We will not do this. What we will do is to honor the commitments that the previous government had made to all those who worked, whether it was the week before elections, whether it was a year before, whether it was the day before, whether it was after the House was dissolved and people were still being issued contracts. We will pay those that the government owes. We understand, Madam President, we understand that this is a government of St. Lucia liability. Even if it was not incurred by this present SLP government, when you are in government, you assume the responsibility of governance and you have to pay the debt. So we will do so, and we will ensure that out of these monies, we try to settle those DFCs as quickly as possible. Madam President, what will happen with this particular initiative is that those monies will be, as we pay down those services and those persons we owe, these are suppliers and whatever else we would want to refer to them as, this is putting money back into the economy, directly back into the economy, and that will be recirculated. And I think, especially these days, post-COVID, people are trying to recover. That would be welcome monies that are going back into the hands of St. Lucians and persons who will be benefiting from it. Madam President, another area that I highlighted is that some of these funds will be used to facilitate debt reprofiling. I am not going to suggest that debt reprofiling is a new concept, but I think it's a necessary undertaking, because what it does is that it allows government to reorganize or reschedule the term, give us a little bit of breathing space, convert short-term loans into longer-term loans, thereby allowing you to realize savings. And the estimated amount that we are hoping to be able to save by doing that is in the range of about $40 million. And Madam President, I do not need to tell you, over a period of 4 to 5 years, what $40 million can do for this economy right now. So if there is a mechanism we can use to reprofile our debt, to be able to save money on existing loans, to allow us first of all, more fiscal space, and secondly, to have that savings available to us, I think it's a very important exercise. Another area, Madam President, that we are proposing that these monies will be used for is to settle outstanding payments to people whose lands were acquired. Land acquisition was somehow a big thing in the last term. There was huge amounts of land acquired for different purposes, and many of these landowners are St. Lucian locals. Their land was taken away, and I understand government has the ability, and it is their purview if they wish to acquire land for national development. But Madam President, it cannot be fair. It cannot be fair. And I have a local example. There is a gentleman from my community who is not well-to-do. I know his family. He has a large family. And many years ago, a portion of land was acquired from his family to provide a very important facility, a small playing field. At the time, I was involved in sports, so I could appreciate the need for the sporting facility to have been made available to the people of the community. As a matter of fact, that's where we used to play our Wule Laba during Good Friday, and the guys used to take their sweat. So I was happy when the government acquired that piece of land for the people. It was in Lacoville. But Madam President, now that we are in government, and I'm finding out that the gentleman's family, to date, and that was, I think it was about 12 years ago. That's a long time ago. You know, 2 administrations have come in, and nobody saw it fit. You know, nobody saw it fit. And that is why I'm not here to say it's your fault or that. The fact is, somebody's land was acquired. And we have had the privilege of using the facility, enjoyed it. I enjoyed my Wule Laba, but only to find out that the gentleman's family, who needs the compensation, have not been compensated. There is another example, Madam President, where a family property was acquired to build a road. And that one was very recent, about 3.5, 4 years ago. You know, there was a need to build an access road, and that was done. And again, for some reason, no compensation. So, Madam President, I believe when people, you have taken their land away from them, and they do not have the privilege of using it, they cannot sell it, they cannot lease it, they cannot farm on it, it is important that we pay them back and compensate them for the use of their property. Madam President, another reason why we believe that these monies are necessary is that, as highlighted in my first few lines or first few minutes, is to ensure that we can pay our public servants, both recurrent salaries and increases. And I want to now bring back to the attention of the Senate that this government, in its less than a year and a half, has honored the promise to pay public servants the increases that were promised to them. Pa di moun ukay fe, eleksyon vini, eleksyon ale, umuchwe kawot like upakabayo. This government has decided to do so. And Madam President, the public servants, we are now in the month of December, and I look forward to the public servants receiving their back pay, was it? Or their increase in this month, just before Christmas. I think I see some people in this very room smiling because they are going to receive theirs. Madam President, this is one of the things that this government is using this money to do, to give people what is duly due to them. You promised it to them. They probably, voted for you for it. And then you leave government and you don't give them the money. We're giving it to them, Madam President. Madam President, another reason why I am happy that we are going to make those finances available is to settle long overdue benefits to people who worked and lost their jobs many years ago. And I'm referring this, in this case, Madam President, to the majestic workers. We came into this parliament to pass legislation to allow them to receive their benefits. And these are poor people, these are average, normal, regular St. Lucians who lost their jobs when these business places were closed and their benefits have not been paid to them. We believe that it is important to give people what they have worked for. And so the majestic workers will benefit from these monies. Madam President, I believe that if you listen to my line of conversation this morning, these monies are monies that most of it, if you look back at some of what I've said, most of these monies had been committed to by our predecessors. And so we are here, most of it is not new borrowing or for anything new. So we are here to ensure, and I mentioned the DFCs, and I mentioned some outstanding land issues, I mentioned the examples. So we are here to honor the commitments that the government of St. Lucia has made, not Labour or Flabo, the government of St. Lucia. Madam President, this is not money that we're going to use to procure any vaccines that we're not going to get. This is not money that we're going to use to buy a building for $65 million and then sell it for $13 million. We're not going to use that money to do so. And Madam President, I don't need to go into too many others. I think I just signaled that we're not going down those lines. Madam President, just to elaborate on the point that I made about commitments before, here are some of the examples that this government is now committed to and has to pay. First of all, you may have heard about this $13 million that was spent on an access road for DSH. We still have to pay those people, Once people have worked, you have to pay them. So while we may have rant and raved in opposition about the road was built, but the people who built the road, they have to get paid. So, Madam President, here we are now having to take care of that. Madam President, the Sulphur Springs project was an ongoing issue, and we have, of course, these are things that we have to pay for. I think some time ago we were here to pass legislation, and I remembered my colleague from Soufrière supporting that initiative to help the co-op down there. I think it was the MOCA development. We decided to give them some assistance. The housing, yes, the housing assistance. Yeah, that Fontaine Jacques MOCA, right, the new development there. There was about $5 million, I think it was, that it would cost for us to provide them with the necessary support to get started. These are the kinds of, I was just being helped by a colleague who lives in the area that the credit union would benefit from that as well. So, Madam President, these are the kinds of things that these monies are going to. Not paying for, pie in the sky things. Madam President, there are a couple of new initiatives, however, that will benefit from that project, from that money. And we're looking at the small business enterprises. About 27 million of that money will be going there. The blue economy, as we had passed or discussed earlier, that will be one of the areas of benefit. Don't forget, Madam President, this is a census year, and the census is ongoing, and it is an expensive exercise, and so we can't blame any government for that. It's just part of a normal exercise, and that has to be funded. And a number of other things. But one of the key issues I want to raise, Madam President, is that we inherited a lot on the books and off the books that we now have to pay. And that has to be done. We will not deny anybody of what is owed to them. We will honor it. Madam President, I want to also indicate that there is no need for anyone to think that we will not accept the reality or what we have always recognized, that the government will borrow. In fact, when the Prime Minister made his budget presentation, I want to actually go to, Madam President, to a particular statement where the Prime Minister, I'm trying to find it, it's okay, I'll find it. Madam President, where the Prime Minister did indicate the amount from the onset that he intended to borrow when he addressed this Parliament earlier this year. So, Madam President, and I think it's a document of the House in any case, so I need not bother to find it. The Prime Minister's budget speech, the budget debate, it was very clear. Just my colleague is assisting me here. The figures were given, and the Prime Minister also indicated what percentage of that would be going to new projects and what percentage had been committed to. So, Madam President, the fact is, we understood the need to eventually or at some point have to borrow. There's no running away from that. But what we make clear is that there are certain initiatives and certain things that this government will not engage in with the money that it borrows and that the people of St. Lucia have to pay. It will ensure that, first of all, outstanding commitments are settled, and the projects and the initiatives that it's going to fund are well explained and accounted for. So, Madam President, it is important also to note that aside from paying those bills that, as I said, we owe, we are committed to ensuring that every cent we borrow, including this amount and any others that is to come, will be to fulfill the promises and the commitments we made to this population as when we promised to get into government to serve them. That is what we're going to do with these monies. We are going to make sure that our commitments to this country are fulfilled. And so I am confident that the people of this country will get an account of what the monies are going to be spent for, and that they will realize that as we continue to tick the boxes of all of the commitments made in our manifesto, in the Prime Minister's budget statements, in our pronouncements to the people when we ask them to put us in office, that we will continue to provide that support. And these commitments will be honored every time we come to this honorable House to ask to approve for any monies that will be borrowed. So, Madam President, with that said, I look forward to the support of the Senate in approving this motion, and look forward to the benefits that it will bring to the people of this country. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of US $102,128,294 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Be it further resolved that A. The loan is repayable in 20 years, commencing from the date of first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. B. The loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month of the date. The first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. C. Interest is payable at a rate of the 6-month Chicago Mercantile Exchange term secured overnight financing rate plus 0.2% and 1.25% per annum. And D. If the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,277, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,261. Senator Fede.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, before I contribute to this debate, I want to extend my most heartfelt condolences to the family of Norbert Williams, a colleague who served as the former Prime Minister's attaché, as well as the Public Relations Officer of the United Workers' Party. We want to say to the family to be strong, and we wish you all the best as you seek to get over this rather difficult time. I want to thank all the well-wishers of St. Lucia who called various officials of the United Workers' Party to express their sincerest condolences. And I want to also thank the leader of government business for his own condolences as issued earlier. Madam President, on the note of condolences, I want to as well extend deep condolences to the number of families who continue to suffer from losing their loved ones as a result of the increased gun violence which we're experiencing in the country. The news is that only sometime last night there was another shooting in the community of Balata, and I want to extend my deepest condolences to that family and all the families, the 2 British nationals that were living here. No doubt a lot of people are finding tremendous pain and agony as they seek to get over their great loss. It's really a situation that we must get on top of. This crime situation is usually getting out of control. Anyway, now to the substantive matter. The motion that's before us today to borrow $270,639,979 Eastern Caribbean dollars. The amount quoted in the motion is actually in US dollars, which would have suggested it's 102 million. But that, Madam Chair, Madam President rather, is a substantial amount when we do the conversion. It's over $250 million by this administration, and over 50% of what they plan to borrow, a whopping $505 million by this administration, as revealed in the Prime Minister's budget statement. Oh, by the way, Madam President, I need to make this a document of the House. I would also like to make the 2023 budget estimates a document of the House. I will be referencing all of these. Social economic review of 2000 and this one is 2006, Social Economic Review of 2021, Social Economic Review of 1998, and I just want to make sure that these documents, supplementary budget by this administration, 2021-2022. I do so, Madam President, because last time I was here, I did in fact correctly quoted the estimates of revenues and expenditure, and the senators on the other side suggested that the 505 million, which I did say that they plan to borrow, was a figure that I pulled from the sky. I'm saying it again, and the summary page of the social economic of the the estimates of revenues and expenditure has continuously shown the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance in his debate in the lower house stated that while he's coming to borrow this money, that this money was planned in advance and is part of his budget statement and his budget outlook for the financial year, in that he's not coming to add on any new debt from what has already been planned to borrow. I'm going to get to new debt in a while because the leader... Yes, ma'am.
I wish to ask whether you intend to quote on specific pages, because you are making all of these documents of the House. Are you going to be quoting specific pages which you can circulate? Because I don't think you can circulate all of these documents as documents of the House. So please be specific when you say you are making these documents of the House. Is it specific pages? And when you do so, when you quote specific page, then you will make a document of the House, yes? Please be guided.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for your wise counsel as always. Of course, I will be quoting specific pages. I've already quoted them as part of my presentation, but I just want to make sure that the documents are here this time and there's no confusion. Now, to the substantive debate. Madam President, it is intriguing that it was not so long ago we had this big lecture on debt. We were told that we are in the third quarter and the government had only borrowed up to that point, I think, about 100 million. We were told that the 505 million was a figure that was pulled from the sky. But today we're seeing evidence. We're seeing justification of the government's plans coming to fruition. And they really...
Senator Jean.
Madam President, on a point of order.
What's your point of order, Senator?
The member is misleading the House. It was never said that the 505 was pulled from the sky. We actually provided, based on the documents that he presented, that the 505 did come from the estimates, but they are mere estimates, and the point was made that they were estimates. So it's misleading for the member to state that members on this side said that the figure was pulled out of the sky. We admitted that the 505 was within the estimates of expenditure that were provided by the member. And so he needs to withdraw that statement and be truthful in what is being presented.
Senator Fede, the Senator Jean has indicated, and rightly so, I recalled, it was Senator Jean who indicated that it was the estimates. He corrected and said it was estimates. So the senator is saying that your use of the words pulled from the sky as opposed to proposed estimates are incorrect. So what say you, Senator Fede, in correcting the use of the word pulled from the sky as opposed to estimates being proposed in the budget?
Madam President, I know you're a woman of literature and language. The pull from the sky means that something doesn't exist. And if I can be clearer, basically, I was asked to sit down the last time I was here because the 505, which I quoted, members wanted me to substantiate it. I insisted it's in the estimates. And members suggested that I need to prove it.
So you're now
if I was
Senator
required,
Fede,
yes.
Senator Fede, are you now just saying that the 505 that you quoted were in the estimates? We are having a discussion about the term pulled from the sky as opposed to it was quoted from the budget document. Okay? So Senator Jean has indicated that the word pulled from the sky was not something that was highfalutin, came from somewhere or nowhere. She's indicating, she's asking that you withdraw and be specific and truthful in your use of the language. It was in the budget document, the estimates.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So, as I move on,
Are you going to pull it? Not pull from the sky? Are we going to?
Madam President, I've already explained what I mean by it.
Are you going to withdraw the words pulled from the sky and say it was in the budget document?
It was in the budget. It was in the budget. Okay. So, and so, Madam President, we're seeing evidence of their plan to borrow a whopping $505 million in this fiscal year coming to fruition. In one go, we are seeing one of the highest amounts that a government is going to come to a House of Assembly to get approved. $270 million, over $250 million in one go. Now, what they used to say, borrowing Tuesday, when the United Workers' Party administration was in government. But today, what is this? This is Reckless Thursday because there's $270 million in one go. Over 50% of what you plan to borrow in the financial year. So I just want to point out the duplicity. And so to justify this change in course, because in opposition, the St. Lucia Labour Party administration, they said a lot about borrowing, a lot of misleading, a lot of mistruths. They didn't tell the people, as they do now, that we are a small island state and that we have very limited resources. And in order to develop our country, we need to borrow so that we can make strategic investments in social and economic opportunities for our people. No, they're only saying that while they're in government. In opposition, borrowing was made to be a demon. They demonized borrowing. It was as if this was the great Satan. But it is funny today that the same political party that has now assumed government, Madam President, has now got to come and show us that not only do they plan to increase the deficit, not only do they plan to increase the amount that was borrowed from the last financial year. In fact, if we look at the estimates, we would see that the amount that they're borrowing goes up from the last fiscal year. Now, for me, if you are going to take this position as a policy or philosophical position on borrowing, then I think that the very first opportunity that you get, you should go in the reverse. You should show the people of St. Lucia that you're actually decreasing the amount that is required to plug the financing gap of the budget. But you did the complete reverse. You put boldly that you're going to borrow $505 million. That's over $500 million. And what is interesting about this borrowing is that the United Workers' Party administration that was criticized, and can I use the word hauled over the coals? Is that okay? Is that acceptable? We were hauled over the coals. It means that our feet was put to fire, if I can explain for the members on the other side. But what it meant, Madam President, was that they vilify us. They excoriated us, right, for borrowing in tough times. The stats will show that the economy declined by 24%. 24% of economic decline. The tourism sector, your main contributor to GDP, was completely shut down. We had no flights coming into the country. You had 15,000 hotel employees that were home. You had no consumption from tourists, so that you weren't collecting VAT on when the tourists are buying food and beverage or going on tours. And all of those contributions that were made to the revenues of this country. After going through a year of COVID, we began the strategic recovery of our economy. And in that strategic recovery of our economy, we grew the economy by 12%, Madam President, 12%, the fastest economic recovery by an Eastern Caribbean country. And in CARICOM, we were only second to Guyana, where they discovered oil.
That's right.
And that economy grew by 19%. But that economic growth, why am I mentioning the 12%? Because I am trying to establish that half of the recovery was given and handed to this government on a platter. We were well on our way to an upward trajectory. In fact, the tourism numbers that they speak of now, and I have to speak of tourism because it's showing where the growth came from. The growth was led by tourism and construction. And that is in the Prime Minister's address. It's in the Social Economic Review. And so by giving this government a better economic platform and a better economic environment, this government is in a better position to be more fiscally responsible. But instead of doing that, instead of saying, let's use the economic momentum which we received from the UWP to now keep true to our word, which they had in opposition, and that is they're not going to borrow as much as we did. They came and they are out borrowing us in the previous financial year. And so to me, this is a government of many contradictions. I really cannot understand the thinking, the philosophy behind them, because it's very confusing. They say one thing in opposition, Madam President, and they see another when they come to government. But you see, the reality of governing has now come home, whereby you're coming to borrow 270 million in one motion. One motion. Madam President, this 270 million is very much in keeping with the estimates of revenues and expenditure for 2022-2023. And so I want to show you a few things that if this government continues in this manner, what their own statistics are saying that will happen. So the first thing that will happen is that the revenues of estimates and expenditure, the summary page, Roman numerals 5, in case you want to follow. The debt, the deficit, Madam President, is going to expand the overall deficit by $394 million, almost $400 million. $394,566,319 to be exact. That's a significant deficit. So it means, therefore, that what they've collected in revenue, or what they project to collect in revenue, which is total revenue at $1.15 billion, and that is a significant improvement from the 818 what we were collecting. It means, therefore, that they are in a better position, Madam President, to borrow less, not more. But they're doing the complete reverse. So their expenses, they've racked it up so high that now they are blaming the United Workers' Party for everything. Now, let me go to the point that my learned friend, if I may say, the learned senator, leader of government business, his arguments were in line that a lot of these were debt that the previous United Workers' Party had committed to. And so therefore, trying to suggest that it's not a lot of new debt. Madam President, when you assume the office of the Minister of Finance, the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act empowers that person to make a number of decisions. This administration came into government 3 quarters after the budget was laid, 3 months rather, after the budget was laid. It came in, the budget for 2021-2022 was laid in April. I was in the lower house in those days. And so they came into office in July. So it would mean, therefore, that just 1 quarter of the financial year would have been exhausted. The government came, not shortly after that, with a supplementary estimates of the revenues and expenditure. What is usually and traditionally called a supplementary budget. Not one change to the policy direction or the financial planning as outlined for that fiscal year. But yet, he is trying to suggest that by going through with the budget, that they are not borrowing new debt. It is your judgment. It is your decision not to change your policy. You cannot blame the United Workers' Party for your lack of foresight, for your lack of planning, by not coming to the Parliament and using the choice that you have, that the Constitution and the legislation of the Public Finance Management Act allows you to do a supplementary budget, reappropriate. Now, listen to this. I want to quote the Minister of Finance. He says, the government has come to the Parliament 7 times to borrow since they have assumed office. $21.6 million for the census. If you don't think that the census is a good thing, cancel the debt. Don't do it. Okay? $36.4 million for COVID. If you believe that $36.4 million for COVID is not a good thing, then forget about it. $20.2 million for the Canadian Clean Energy Project, which was also mentioned here as the Sulphur Spring Project. That's the geothermal project. If you don't believe that the geothermal is a good project, then cancel, cut, do the budgetary cuts, right? But if you are going to endorse the borrowings of the United Workers' Party for these projects, then it is a compelling endorsement of the UWP policies that these are good policies and you have no choice but to continue them. And that's the argument that we're making here today. That's the argument, Madam President. So to tell people, to make this erroneous statement that these are all old debts, this is Flabo debt, what is this about? But you are now in government and you have the opportunity to change the debt, go in a different policy direction. If you believe that spending the money on the STEP program is better than the geothermal project, then you have the opportunity to do it. You are the government. So please, that is inaccurate, Madam President. It is misleading to the public. It is not true for the government to continue. Then they said, oh, these are our debts, the new debt, the Prime Minister went on. He said 27 million for small SME loans from the CDB. He went on to state as well 0.5 million in the MOCA housing scheme in Sufra. The blue economy, $28.6 million. Now, Madam President, there is nothing more or less misleading from this administration, not taking responsibility. So you mean to tell me that you will spend 9 months in your first financial year in the term, and all you will do is continue to implement UWP policies. But that's what you're doing. You have implemented not a single new tourism policy. All you have done is change the name of policies that the United Workers' Party has already implemented. You have not come with an economic master plan to take us out of this fiscal situation which we have found ourselves. And so, Madam President, I reject this argument that the government has run the country on very little. No, you have run the country on borrowing. You have had to borrow. You have no choice but to borrow. You have a balance, an overall balance of over 390 something million in the estimates. And instead of you showing the country that you are now going to tighten the fiscal imbalances that we have, you are now expanding the balances, because the estimates show that you are indeed taking up the aggregate of the overall balance. The overall balance in the social economic review, the estimates of 2022-2023 shows that the actual outturn for 2021-2022, $374 million. This government, in its budget, is proposing to take it to $394 million. So instead of tightening the fiscal gap, you're widening the fiscal gap. You're in a spending spree, my friend. So you're not being fiscally responsible as you are trying to make it out to be. Now, time will catch up with you, because there'll be a next budget. And in that next budget, right, there will be no blaming of trying to say that it's somebody else's debt. This is your debt. Madam President, when we look at the balances of the balances as a percentage of GDP, most economists will tell you that they would like the balances to be somewhere in the region of 3% of GDP. This government is proposing a negative overall balance of 7.2. So a deficit of 7.2% of GDP, more than doubled of where it should be. Madam President, I put it to you, this government is taking us to a fiscal cliff. And so we have to hang on for our lives. Because if we don't hang on for our lives, Madam President, this country is going to collapse under its management. And so, therefore, not very pleasing, coming here to borrow. And this is not mostly for capital. I heard him, it's mostly for budgetary support. And with the budgetary support, it means that most of the monies are going to fund operating expenses. And rather than investing this money in capital projects mostly, so that we can see growth of the economy. And that growth, Madam President, what that will do is that growth will then create new jobs, new opportunity for small businesses. It will create more opportunity for taxes, so that we can begin, Madam President, to depend less on external borrowing or borrowing from bonds, and instead, Madam President, come closer to balancing the operating budget, at least. But we are very far from that. We see in every economic indicator, every fiscal indicator, the government is certainly going in the wrong direction. We look at the page of the various balances in the summary, and we see that everything is negative. And when you see that everything is negative, then it begins to worry. You see that the current surplus, negative 199 million, that's almost negative 200 million of your current balances. Your recurrent surplus, negative 300 million, and your overall is negative 394. So really and truly, borrowing this kind of money comes at a very, very difficult time, and comes at a very precarious time fiscally. The point is that this government has inherited a better economic environment, and one would have hoped that by inheriting that economic environment, we would have seen a lot more prudence in the fiscal situation of the country and some of the financial decisions that they have made. Now, you know, whenever we get into these arguments, what my colleagues like to do is they like to go and take a whole lot of specific things and say you did that and you did that. But I think that the numbers here are clear that your budget, their budget, Madam President, through you, is certainly going in the wrong direction. Madam President, the fallacy or the perception that the United Workers' Party in a single fiscal year borrowed $1 billion is absolutely untrue. I ask and challenge any member on the opposite side to disprove that we have ever borrowed $1 billion in a fiscal financial year. That is an absolute untruth. We have never done that, not even in the worst of times during COVID, had we carried up the net official debt by $1 billion. And so I have heard this debate several times in both houses, and I just believe, Madam President, that this is not a fact at all. And so, Madam President, looking at the country economically and looking at the challenge that are going to be before us with a deficit of almost 400 million, revenues that are just over $1 billion, and looking at the expenses, 1.8 billion is being projected by this government to be spent. There really needs to be a fiscal overhauling of the country. There really needs to be a very surgical look at the fiscal indicators of this country, and the government needs to come up fast and stop making excuses. There is no escaping from an economic master plan. The only way we can get out of this fiscal hole that we're in is to grow the economy. And so I put forward that, you know, rather than us coming to borrow 270 million, I would have loved to have seen this in surpluses, that we would have sufficiently managed our expenses. And by managing our expenses, we would have collected 270 million in surplus taxes. That is achievable with commitment, that is achievable with foresight, that is achievable with genius and innovative thinking, and with a big economic master plan to grow this economy, to create jobs for more people, so that the 20,000 that the Social Economic Review shows us that are unemployed today, or the 37% of the young people that are unemployed, rather than being unproductive citizens, that they can become productive citizens and help us to collectively expand this economy. And so by expanding the economy, then all of us now are contributing to the fiscal repair or the fiscal overhauling that is required to take place in this country. Madam President, we also have a situation of low salaries across the spectrum of this economy, whether it's in tourism, in retail. A lot of people are earning below the tax threshold. And so the problems that we're seeing now, Madam President, is as a result of the fact that many people are unable to pay income tax because of the very small salaries that they earn. And so by having a significant sum of your workforce below the tax threshold, it would mean that they are not able to contribute to help you to raise the revenue, to tighten this gap that we're talking about. So instead of being a deficit of 394 million, then what we would want to do, Madam President, is in fact tighten that and get it to somewhere close to maybe 200 million. But we need to have targets. And one of the things that I haven't seen coming forward from the government side, what are the targets to tighten this fiscal gap? How are we going to accomplish by reducing the 394, which is proposed for this financial year? But don't tell me we will be comfortable with going forward next year in keeping the deficit at the same levels. Now, the good thing about this loan is that I'm very proud to see that the government continues to take a page from the United Workers' Party. And that is when we came in as a new administration in 2016, we realized that the cooperative agreement between ourselves and the people and the Republic of China, Taiwan, could be expanded away from just doing what is called the CDP program and investments in agriculture and so on. I think it's somewhere about 34 billion it's valued at.
Senator Fede, you
yes.
have 15 minutes left.
Thank you, Madam President. But what we saw was that this relationship could be leveraged in a way that can help us to expand our economy in a significant way. And what we did was we then started the process of going to the Taiwanese and we said, listen, we want to expand our tourism sector, and in order for us to do so, we have to deal with an overcrowding situation that we have at the Urinori International Airport. And we went and we were able to negotiate with the Exim Bank, which is the same bank that is lending the government this money. And I was very happy to hear the Minister of Finance stated that the terms of this loan are in keeping with past loans before, if I quoted him. So he's definitely referring to the loans that we have negotiated with the Taiwanese, and that is to ensure that there is a 5-year moratorium so that you pay on the interest only, and then a very concessionary term of interest, which is very important, and which can help the fiscal ill health of our country. And I'm stressing this, Madam President, because when there is fiscal ill health, it reduces our ability to invest in education, in healthcare, in infrastructure development, in national security, in sports development, and all of the good things that governments must do to keep our country going. So I was very happy to see that the government is also continuing the effort started by us to replace short-term market-driven debt with a long-term, more concessionary financing. And so I remember that during COVID, we had the opportunity. And while we were borrowing, Madam President, the reason why we went after a lot of these loans, because COVID gave our country an opportunity to begin the restructuring of the debt profile. I remember sitting at one meeting and the stock of market debt was somewhere in the region of about 78%, 78% of the total debt stock. Now, Madam President, that is a very, very precarious situation in that with market-driven debt, treasury bonds and treasury bills, they are usually for about a year with the treasury bills, and the bonds are usually for about 3 years. So it would mean that the short-term debt would eat up the cash flow of government and totally disrupt the operation of government, whereby if the investor or the people who are investing in these bonds would call in on the bonds, it would mean that the government would have to find very significant sums to pay those individuals. And the interest rates as well are usually much higher because it's market-driven debt. And, you know, it is mostly debt by wealthy individuals in the private sector. This government proposed in the estimates that external borrowing, out of the 505 that it plans, external borrowing will be $425 million, and the treasury bills and bonds are going to account for $79.7 million. So almost $80 million that will come from bonds and treasury bills. But back to the point that COVID allowed. we were able to get about 30 million US from the CDB, from the IMF, and from the World Bank. And so by getting those monies, which almost accounted for about 100 million US dollars, what it did is that it allowed us to then restructure and reprofile the debt. And so if it's one good thing I will support, is that this government is moving in line with a policy that the United Workers' Party started while we were in government. And that's a good thing about it. And I'm not beating you over the head because you're borrowing. The issue that I take is that you took a position, you had a very strong philosophical position as it related to debt in opposition, and we're seeing something totally different as you come in. So I was quite happy to hear the Minister of Finance indicated that with efforts started by us, and now they're continuing, that the debt or the percentage of market-driven debt has come down significantly. It didn't come down by magic because it was much higher. It was about 70-something cents to the dollar. But now it's coming down to about 50 cents to the dollar in terms of the amount of market-driven debt. That's a good thing. And that is the beginning of now starting to reprofile the debt that we have on the stock. Now, the last thing I'll say, and I want the members to look at the debt burden, and if we look at principal and interest, this is the last point. Now, the reason why we realize that if you look at principal and interest payments, you will see that there is not a significant change over the years on the summary page. The reason why there's not a significant change on the principal and interest payments is because of what I'm saying to you. By negotiating long-term debt that have 5-year moratoriums, it would mean that you're not paying on principal, but you're just paying on interest. So, for example, the airport loan was designed in that fashion. And the reason why that you see that the debt burden has not changed significantly over the years, look at the few years that is being proposed, is because of the fact that under the United Workers' Party administration, we began that process of reprofiling the debt from short-term to long-term. And so in some instances, for example, the moratorium is as much as 10 years, where you just had to pay the interest and no principal. Now, by doing that with some of the debt that came from the IMF's Rapid Resource Facility, is that it did not significantly impact the debt burden in the short term. And that's a significant point. It gives the government's cash flow some breathing space so that you can now invest in other things, in other economic growth things, so that you can continue the work that we have started to recover this economy. But I'm going to close like this, Madam President, and tell you that some of the things that I see that are happening, where the government has disrupted and stalled and certain projects, this is going to take the country in the wrong direction. This is going to significantly disrepair the economic growth and recovery that the United Workers' Party administration has started. And so we see that instead of keeping at the 12% that the growth of the economy started on, we see that the growth is slowing down because ECLAC, in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance, would have coordinated some information and suggested that in this financial year, instead of growing by 12%, we're going to grow by 6%, right? So that is a significant decline in the pace of growth, Madam President. In fact, what we want to do to repair this fiscal situation that we've just outlined is to continue the pace of growth on the same trajectory which you found it. There's no escaping from growth, my friend. You've got to grow this economy, create jobs, create opportunity for young people in this country. So all the stuff that you're doing, time will catch up with you, and you will see that there is simply no escaping from growth. Madam President, I want to thank you for your indulgence today, and to say to you that while I, in principle, support the motion because I believe that the work of government must continue, I totally dislike and I totally, Madam President, object to the duplicity and the double standards which this government continues to display as it pertains to the issue of borrowing in this country. I think the time has come, Madam President, that they must level with the people of St. Lucia, say to the people of St. Lucia that they have misled them in opposition, and or perhaps some of the statements they made were reckless, and therefore now that they're governing, that reality has come home to them, and they have now recognized that they need to be pardoned for the mistakes they've made by reckless statements in opposition. I thank you.
Senator Aziz.
Madam President, although it's a bit late, I'd like to publicly add my voice to the congratulatory messages to you on the assumption of President of the Senate. And let me also take this opportunity to wish you and my colleagues and the rest of the country season's greetings. 'Tis that time of the year. It is my pleasure to lend my support for the motion before the Senate. And this feels so much like a $100 million Christmas present to the people of St. Lucia. And it comes on the heels of so many other instruments that we have passed this year, all in support of opportunities, employment, and small business alike for so many of our marginalized people and vulnerable communities. This year alone, it was also my pleasure to support the bills related to the blue economy, the youth economy, community tourism, and this morning it was so gratifying to see the works being done on the sides of the road along the northern corridor, meaning that some people are on programs for the beautification of our roadways. This motion comes as no surprise, given the pledges of the Honorable Prime Minister in his budget address this year. What amazes me is that he was able to hold off for such a long time before accessing these instruments to finance his budget. And I think that in itself is commendable. While many of these programs financed by these loan instruments promise hope and opportunity to marginalized groups and vulnerable communities, I think it's important to remind these very same beneficiaries, Madam President, that they too have a part to play. And they too need to step up when these opportunities are provided. Not that I doubt their interest in these opportunities. Some weeks ago, the SLHTA, in our efforts to identify 50 unemployed youth for on-the-job training opportunities within the hospitality industry, communicated such to the social transformation officers and invited them to identify individuals and ask them to come visit with us for the interviews. Over 300 people showed up at our doorsteps. 300 unemployed individuals looking for opportunities. It meant to me that they have a very vested interest in their own growth and their own development. And it is good to see various aspects of this loan that we are set to approve today, this motion that we're set to approve today, for this loan to go towards infrastructural programs, funding social capital projects, and of course, debt reduction and settlement of payables to some private sector entities. Now, I have called on many occasions for us to reduce the bureaucracy, allowing the persons for whom these benefits are being targeted to be able to access them more freely and without all the red tape. And that's because I get the sense that not only is there a keen interest in people wanting these opportunities, there seemed, to my mind, to be a keen interest in people wanting hand-ups as opposed to handouts. And so our efforts at engaging them and providing opportunities to them must have as well a strong, very strong development component to it, so that they are endowed with the skills to honor the responsibilities that are placed upon them once they had been gifted the opportunities presented by these various facilities that I mentioned earlier on. And when these opportunities flow out, the sad reality is that the signs of our times right now could very well threaten to suffocate, strangle, stagnate the full potential of these opportunities to our people. And I speak with reference to the crime situation and the potential this has to neutralize the gains of what it is we're trying as a country to accomplish here. I believe generally citizens want to make a contribution to what is being financed by some of these loan instruments. This week, a group of like-minded individuals under the banner of Citizens for Peace and Prosperity launched what we call our 6 bridges to peace and prosperity across the island. And the various programs, which require north of millions of dollars to finance, were not programs that were just pulled out of the clouds, but came out of engagements with over 40 different representatives from various constituents. And when put into various thematic areas, communities are calling for, at least those who have spoken to us, are calling for the empowerment of individuals and their communities, the use of creative arts as avenues to increase self-worth and identity, improvement of parenting programs and child development programs, a strong violence interruption strategy that will help us to get ahead of the conflicts, sports to build community connections and mobilize peace, and improvement of recreational infrastructure. In our dialogue and discussions, it's very clear that while the demand for financing seems high, there are so many existing pools of funding available that can be realigned and reallocated to support some of these very self-same programs that our communities are calling for. These bridges grow from strength to strength. And this week alone, after we went public with it, we've received even more calls from private sector organizations and private sector entities, donating their time. One kindergarten called and happily donated 15 spots for young mothers who come from vulnerable households but couldn't find a place for their kids while they worked, and offered up those opportunities to us. Media houses have called, volunteering and donating time spots so that we can continue to share that message and encourage our citizens to step up and play their part, that the productive use of these opportunities that present themselves, the efforts to reduce crime and to mitigate an unsecure environment, is everybody's responsibility. Although the fact is, we each play our role at various levels. So while the police have their role to play, clearly at a community level, we have our roles to play as well. So it is my hope that the opportunities that are promised and the opportunities which will be unlocked by this motion, these loans, these programs, are not suffocated by the challenges of crime which affect us right now. If it's anything we have learned from the COVID shock, is that tourism is so important to the country right now. Not only because of the revenues it generates from guests visiting our shores, but also because of the linkages that it provides to so many other sectors. And now, given the introduction of the Community Tourism Agency, the possible indigenous-based, community-based, locally owned businesses that could benefit and thrive from guests permeating our communities and going through our communities. So, Madam President, it is my hope that given so many programs that we have committed to financing this year, that 2023 will be the year of implementation, that we will start to see these investments start to bear fruit, that we will start to see the young people who have gone through these on-the-job training programs be kept within various business houses, that they will open up their own businesses, that community tourism will unlock opportunities in our communities, and small and micro establishments will start to benefit from the windfall of those experiences. And that collectively, as we move towards addressing some of the social issues that plague us, that as a country and as a people, we will be, each other's keeper, and we can raise the tides of peace and prosperity throughout our country together. And with those few words, I support the motion before us today. Thank you.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few words on the motion before us. When I listened to the presentation by the Honorable Leader of Government Business, sadly one phrase came to mind, and that is that the bill comes due always. When I listened to the breakdown of what this borrowing is going to be used for, I could not help but notice that a lot of it is due to decisions that have been taken over a number of administrations that we are now being called upon to pay for, and our generations to come will be required to pay for, because this is a 20-year loan. I applaud, and I will go into that a little bit further, the effort to move away from short-term borrowing into longer-term borrowing. But the fact is, at the end of the day, that money still must be repaid. And if I take, for example, the issue of land acquisitions, which is an issue that I would like to say, the privilege of being involved in during my years, both with government and in the private sector. It's really a sad indictment, again, on a number of administrations in the manner in which land acquisitions have been treated. Without going into too much detail, it's been used both as a reward in some cases and a punishment in other cases. You find persons who get their monies very, very quickly, and others who have to wait. I remember dealing with a matter where the land was acquired before I was born and had not been paid up to the time that I was dealing with the matter. This is clearly not a sustainable situation and has to be addressed. And I applaud the government for taking the step to address it. But the fact is, we are paying excess monies because you have to pay interest on the monies on the acquisitions. And so the attitude where we just acquire and say we'll pay for it at some time in the future is something we have to address, because it is affecting us and it is going to continue to affect us until such time as we are able to clear off that backlog of long-standing land acquisition debts. I note as well that a large chunk of the money will be used, and I commend that payments will be made to the hard-working public servants who have not seen an increase for a while and have back pay due to them. But again, the question arises, if you're borrowing to pay your recurrent expenditure, what does that say about your economic structure? That is clearly, again, not a sustainable thing. I appreciate that the governments often find themselves with their back to the wall in having to compensate public servants. And I do not adhere to the view that all public servants are a waste of time, that they just take up space, that they don't contribute to the development of our country. Again, having been a public servant and having to engage with a number of public servants and a number of sectors, I appreciate the work, the industry, the innovation that comes from these employees. And so they do earn their keep, but it cannot be a situation where we are borrowing to pay for them. That does not move the economy and the country forward, and it is clearly not sustainable. So again, that is something that we need to address. The DFCs, I'm not going to go too much into that, but again, I think there is another, which started off as a positive, innovative attempt by government to finance necessary infrastructure projects. But again, through mismanagement, if we want to call it that, or blatant self-interest in some cases, again, it has been allowed to get out of hand and out of control. And we're now faced with a huge debt based on the constant engagement in DFCs without proper planning for exactly what these projects are to be, how they're going to contribute to the infrastructural development and the economic development of St. Lucia, and perhaps more importantly, how they're going to pay for themselves. I noted also that a large chunk of it is going to be used to pay government payables. And I commend the government for continuing and ensuring that persons who have incurred liability, who the government has incurred liabilities to, are being settled. Again, I've had the experience of observing the impact of persons who've worked and done what they've had to do, not being paid. And more importantly, the knock-on effect of not getting your monies on time. Sometimes from the political point of view, we tend to think, okay, we'll punish this person because they are operative for the other side. Not recognizing that, one, they are St. Lucian. Two, they oftentimes employ other persons. Three, they have commitments to the banks, to the NIC, and to a number of other entities. And when they don't get paid, those entities don't get paid. And when those entities don't get paid, they can't meet their liabilities either. So in the same way, you have a multiplier effect when you pump money into an economy through infrastructural development. You have a negative multiplier effect when you withhold payments that are due and have been earned by persons. So I commend the government for doing this. It will hopefully help push our economic growth. I've heard that said this morning, that we need to develop and foster economic growth. And these are some of the steps that can be taken to do so. The debt reprofiling, I commend. We need to ensure that we move away from the short-term expensive borrowing into a more longer and more sustainable debt structure. But that being said, when we are borrowing, we need to ensure that the borrowing is productive borrowing. As I've already noted, a lot of this borrowing seems to be just meeting dead stock and meeting recurrent expenditure. That is not necessarily where we need to be and what we need to be focusing on. And so hopefully, I'm hoping that once the government has cleared off these things, we can begin to see borrowing that is aimed at growing the economy, at improving and increasing our economic development. But also in the thought that the debt comes due always, and following on from what my colleague senator said, I note that we are now in the grip of a serious crime wave. That is something that did not happen overnight. That is a bill that we've been accruing for a number of years. And somewhat diametrically opposed to what I've just said, I would like to encourage the government to think about using some of these funds to develop social interventions. I don't want to say social programs, but social interventions which can lead to persons becoming more integrated in society. Because I think part of the problem and part of the reason why we have the levels of criminality that we do is that we have focused a lot on material and economic growth without working simultaneously on social growth. So persons look and they see affluence around them, but they don't feel it. And because they don't feel it and they only value themselves in relation to that affluence, they don't see how they play a part in society. And so not playing a part in society, I have to find a way to give value and meaning to my life. And sadly, if we don't give them the means of doing so in a productive social sector, they will find other means. And so they will get involved in drugs, they'll get involved in theft, and ultimately, sadly, they get involved in violent crime. Merely pumping money into society is not going to solve those problems. We need to ensure that we do other interventions, as my colleague pointed out, where persons can begin to feel value and connected to society and realize that their actions, positive and negative, impact on everyone else. That we can develop proper means of conflict resolution so that persons don't then turn to violence to resolve even the smallest things. That at least we have an opportunity to pause, to think critically and analyze our activities and the impact of those activities before we move forward. I remember growing up that we had a lot of things like scouts, things like brownies for the girls, guides. The cadet corps does a lot of good work now, but sadly they seem to be the only sort of uniform, disciplined organization, and pathfinders as well. Those seem to be the only two real vibrant, uniformed groups that exist anymore. And the value of those groups is not just that it gave you something to do, but it instilled a lot of values in young persons. It gave them a sense of belonging. And oftentimes that's where gangs come in. Gangs give people a sense of belonging because at the end of the day, we are all social animals and we are looking for somewhere to belong. And if you don't have a positive outlet for it, you're going to find a negative. And so I want the government to consider in using these funds that in addition to the productive sectors, which I've encouraged them to do, that they look at developing programs for social intervention. I was thinking as well, for example, even simple things like kindergarten places. My colleague mentioned the fact that they were able to get some volunteered, but it raises the question, why isn't kindergarten and daycare something that is freely and publicly available? That alone would free up parents. It would also give children an opportunity to begin learning and ensuring that they're all starting from a same level playing field. too often there's the inequalities in society just get exacerbated and increase as age goes on. We need to make sure that we're making these interventions as early as possible so that we can change the attitudes of persons, we can change their socialization, so that from the very beginning they have that sense of belonging that I think we seem to be losing in St. Lucia. And so with that, I accept that we need to borrow. I accept that the government has a lot of commitments that it needs to address. I commend them for addressing some of them. I encourage them to use the funds responsibly, and in particular for economic growth. But I also implore them to use some of these funds for social interventions that can help perhaps to combat the crime situation that we are facing currently. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Jean.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to echo the sentiments expressed by the Leader of Government Business in extending condolences to colleagues on the opposite side on the passing of Mr. Norbert Williams. I think he was the former attaché to the previous Prime Minister, and also to extend his condolences to his friends and family. Madam President, I wish to lend my support to the motion to borrow the sum of $102 million US dollars, or equivalent to 277.4 million EC dollars from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China for budgetary support in the financial year 2022-2023. Madam President, when I see a motion to borrow, the question that I ask myself is, how is a budget or a deficit budget financed? A deficit budget suggests that your revenues are lower than your expenses. And therefore, there is this gap that must be filled. Where do you get the money from if you do not have the money? Like any responsible individual, the government would have to face financial institutions to meet the gap between your revenue and your expenses. Madam President, I am aware that while this current government was in opposition, there was criticism of the current administration on the level of borrowing that took place at the time. It was not that they should not have borrowed, because we well understand that a responsible government must borrow. In fact, if they don't borrow, some of what was borrowed before would go into default. And you have some governments, some jurisdictions that have defaulting bonds and treasury bills and other loans. So a responsible government must finance the deficit which occurs between their revenue and their expenses. But Madam President, we have to look at history. And I like to go back to history because that paints the picture of what has occurred in the past and what perhaps is likely to occur in the future. Madam President, I will present the estimates, like my colleague on the other side, not the book, the whole book, but sections of the estimate. And the summary page of the estimates of expenditure from the years 2015 to 2022. And to look at Roman numeral 5, page Roman numeral 5 of each of these estimates. In the year 2015-2016, the financial year 2015-2016, the government's financing requirement or debt, or the amount that was borrowed to finance the budget, stood at $246 million. I will just round it off because it has a whole set of figures behind it. 246 in 2015-2016. In 2016-2017, 199 million. In 2017-2018, 240 million. I want us to note the increases from year to year. In 2018-2019, the estimate for that year was 300 million, from 240 to 300. In 2019-2020, 329 million. I want us to note, Madam President, that this was prior to the COVID pandemic, because I hear a lot of blame placed on COVID. Tout bagay say COVID. Just merely COVID. Vaccine COVID. Tout bagay COVID. 2019-2020, 329 million. 2020 to 2021, me COVID vive $601 million. That was what was borrowed, the actual of what was borrowed by the then administration over the financial year 2020 to 2021. In 2021 to 2022, the estimates, because the actuals have not yet been presented, is $509 million. All of these can be found in the various estimates of expenditure of the government of St. Lucia. Madam President, in the Prime Minister's budget address, at page 62, and I will present as a document of the House, the Prime Minister indicated, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the $1.327 billion in revenue and grants, the net financing needs of the budget amounting to $505.124 million will be met from the following sources. So the Prime Minister indicated blatantly in his budget presentation that he intends to finance the budget in the tune of $505 million from various sources, and that would be from debt, from other financing institutions. So there is no secret in the 505. But like we presented before, that same 505 is in the estimates of expenditure for the financial year 2022-23. But it is worthy of note, Madam President, that the current Prime Minister has taken the financing component from a 509 of the previous year to a 505 for this current year. And as we speak, what is being borrowed is $277 million plus a previous
Madam
100.
President, I rise on a point of order.
What is your point of order,
Yes. So
Senator?
the member is misleading the House because the approved estimates for 2021, 2022 is 509. But the outturn, which was projected for the same year, is actually 498 million. Now, we all know that the budget is done closer towards March, and so the government would have had the site closer towards the end of the financial year and would have brought it down to 498. So those figures were revised downwards. So I think that it's not increased at all. In fact, the Prime Minister is going upwards. So I just want to clarify that.
Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam President. If the member is listening, I said that the estimates, the approved estimates, I know how to read estimates, Madam President. The projected outturn is in the favor of this current government, who came into office on July of 2021 and reduced the amount of financing. So you want me to use that figure? I can use that figure, Madam President. So it went down to 498. You know what this suggests? It suggests that the prudent financial management of this government has reduced the financing requirement for the last year, 2021-22.
Again, Madam President, I rise on the point of order. The member continues to mislead the House.
You wait for my question before you proceed. You said you want a point of order. May I ask you, what is your point of order? Now you should speak.
Madam President, the member continues to mislead the House. Now, she used the figure 509 because it's higher than the 505 to make the point that what was estimated, right, was a higher number. But what we see, Madam President, is that the figure is actually 498. The outturn is actually very clear, but the outturn is not because of the SLP administration. So if you are going to say that the outturn of this belongs to you, you can't speak from both sides of your mouth, because what is happening is that you don't want to take the debt, because you're saying the debt is UWP debt, but now you're saying the 498 is yours. You can't have it both ways. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, senators, come on.
Proceed, Senator Shah.
Madam President, I know that I am not misleading the House. I actually stayed away deliberately from the projected outturn until the actual figures are presented in the estimates. However, Madam President, if you go deeper into the figures, you would see that the outturn was a result, the lower outturn was a result of a reduction in expenditure. And this expenditure would have been incurred during the period April of 2021 to March of 2022. Now, which was the government that remained during this year for the greater part of the year? So if we're talking prudent financial management, would we bring it from April to July? During the same period that we had contracts ready to be signed in the amount of $70+ million for St. Jude? Is that the time that we want to reference? Madam President, we must be careful how we use figures, because we must put these figures in the context of time, of place, and of people. Madam President, I heard my colleague on the other side refer to some debt that was in the motions that came before us a few weeks ago, and stated that we should cancel the census, cancel the geothermal development. And I wonder where this member is living, residing. A census is not something a country has a choice to do.
Madam President, again, I have to say that the member is misleading the House by misrepresenting statements that I have made. I have said to the member that if they are saying that the debt taken for the census, taken for the clean energy project, right, taken for the various items, and I was very clear, COVID, the census, the clean energy project, I'm saying that if you are of the opinion that those are bad decisions, bad financial decisions, then you have the authority to cancel them. That's what I'm saying. But I never said to cancel the census. The mere fact that I sat in the cabinet,
thank you, Senator
and that
Fede.
same cabinet
Thank you, Senator Fede.
approved the borrowing for
Thank
these
you,
line
Senator
items,
Fede.
is
You've made
because
your
I
point.
agree with those positions.
You've made your point. You missed it. Senator Jean, he did say if you think it was irrelevant, it should be cancelled. Thank you very much, Senators. Senators, you may proceed, Senator Jean.
Madam President, I love coffee. And I heard that, I'm told that coffee helps with dementia. But we have to start drinking it from now, because sometimes I think we may have the tendency to have a little slow dementia coming in. But Madam President, cancel the census. If we knew that the census would have cost so much money, we should have canceled the census. If we knew the geothermal project would have cost that amount of money, we should have canceled the geothermal project. Madam President.
President, again, the member is misleading the House. I need to re-emphasize, I quoted the Minister of Finance, who said that since assuming the government, he has come to the Parliament 7 times to borrow. And in those 7 times, 21.6 million for the census, 36.4 for COVID, 27 million, 20.2 million for the Canadian Clean Energy Project. Now, by saying that the 270 is part of new debt, which also include the housing project, $500,000, and then 27 million for small businesses, what the Prime Minister was saying is that the debt for the census and for COVID and for the Canadian, that's not his government's debt. I'm saying that that is erroneous because the Prime Minister has it within his powers to cancel those debts for those line items if your administration believes that these debts are bad decisions. So please, I am begging the Senator to withdraw her line of argument because she's totally misrepresenting me. That's all I'm saying. I didn't say to cancel the census because I was part of a cabinet that approved spending in these very strategic areas of national development. So I'm very, very much in support of them. But is in the context of what the Minister of Finance says, I'm saying you have the opportunity to cancel the debt. I even said that you brought a supplementary budget to the House, and a supplementary budget gave you the opportunity to totally overhaul.
Senator Jean, I shall repeat that Senator Fede did. This is what he said. If you think it was a bad debt, you should have cancelled. This is what he said. So I think we should move on because it will cause a back and forth and delay our discussion in the House. So I suggest that you move on, Senator Jean.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm saying the same thing, Madam President. Exactly what he says, but let us move on. So, I want to know, what do we give priority when debt is incurred? Do we give horses priority, Madam President? Do we give plastic grass priority, Madam President? Do we give Ernst & Young priority, Madam President, for preparing a budget that our civil servants could have done? Do we give Pomandu priority? Do we give friends and family priority? Do we give a St. Jude box priority? Do we spend £2,000 a night at a hotel in London and that is priority, Madam President? Madam President, I want us to focus on the reason for the debt. And I agree with the independent senator that we should be careful about utilizing the debt for recurrent expenditure. However, Madam President, when commitments are made, and the leader of government business did indicate that these commitments are made by the government of St. Lucia. So it is not to say that one administration has made a commitment, a financial commitment to someone, and another administration can say, I am not paying it, because it is on the books of the government of St. Lucia. So the design, finance, construct roads that were built, and it's roads, because that methodology can only be used for immovable infrastructure, and for infrastructure of which title cannot pass to the contractor. So a design, finance, construct is a method that is used to build roads on credit. That's what it is, to build roads on credit. So you ask a contractor to build a portion of road for you, whether it is a mile or so. He uses his own finance to build that road, and you're expected to repay him over a period of time. These design, finance, construct roads now become liabilities of the government because you have to repay them over a period of time. And usually that period of time is short term. Like the independent senator is saying, these are short term instruments. These are instruments that have to be repaid, some in as short a time as 5 years. So the repayments are very, very, very large. And so the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party, under the stewardship of, or the leadership of Honorable Philip J. Pierre, has $112 million of these DFCs to repay. How do they repay them? And Madam President, we would recall a couple of years ago, we saw it in the media that over 30 direct awards were issued in one day. In one day. You know what these direct awards are? These direct awards are, again, approvals without competitive bidding. So we're not sure that we have gotten the least cost for the projects that we intended to undertake. It seemed as if during that time, Madam President, the tenders board was closed. No tendering was taking place. Director awards take affaire. It take a drive tout partout. Tout le monde take a hand contract. Direct award. Madam President, a responsible government would ensure that there is competitive bidding and that direct awards are used only in cases of emergency or where a particular contractor has the expertise that many others don't have. Mais fait chimé, fait canal, fait pont, tout qualité bagay te ka fait, Madam President, sans competitive bidding. Nous voulons à présent pour le gouvernement faire magique. Qui manière il ça repay ces bails-là qu'ils ont à faire? How do they repay what is already on the books of the government of St. Lucia if they do not face a financial institution to borrow that money? Madam President, this is the same administration that had a whole set of payables, and this is included in the amount to be repaid. Payables, say creditors. A lot crédit encore. Immediately following July 26th, you had a lot of people converge on the Ministry of Infrastructure, indicating that they had worked and they had not gotten paid. Suppliers had not gotten paid. Small contractors had not gotten paid. And so, Madam President, a responsible government who puts the people of St. Lucia first would have to find a source to repay them, Madam President. So it's not the borrowing, it's what the borrowing is being done, it's being used for. We have to ensure that when there is borrowing, Madam President, that there is a corresponding accountability for what is being borrowed. And not kind of blurred. You're seeing some blurred things happening after money is borrowed. Madam President, we also saw an HIA loan, Uranora International Airport, a loan taken by a former administration in the amount of $175 million US, when there was a process in train to have a public-private partnership arrangement for that very same international airport. Madam President, international airports in the world are owned through PPP arrangements. In England, in many other parts of the world, in Jamaica. So it's not far-fetched to have a PPP arrangement for the Uranora International Airport, but instead, $175 million was secured to build that international airport. Madam President, part of that loan that is being taken by the government of St. Lucia from the Republic of China, Taiwan, has to repay the Rodney Bay. I cannot call it a road. People, I don't know what to call it. The thing that you have to pass on if you want to go inside behind the Baywalk Mall. The thing. The place where you have to pass and the sidewalk going up like the Tower of Babel. The place where you have to pass by Kilago. That is what the government of St. Lucia is now riddled with and has to repay. Madam President, this is an indictment on the people of St. Lucia to have had to suffer at the hands of people who made these poor decisions. And so, an incoming government has these commitments, must meet these commitments, and on behalf of the people of St. Lucia, has to face financial institutions in order to borrow to meet these commitments. So, Madam President, I support the resolution to borrow in that amount of money. I want to commend the administration of the St. Lucia Labour Party. I also want to commend them for not only putting people first, but understanding the plight of our people. Madam President, everybody knows that we need a little something extra for Christmas. And imagine this is the government that will pay civil servants back pay. Next week, I think.
Exactly, just like the date.
We could have cancelled that debt, Madam President.
Yes, we could have
The government, the current government could have cancelled that debt, Madam President, but a prudent financial management or an administration that practices prudent financial management and puts people first would not cancel a debt to civil servants. They will pay them in December to ensure they have some extra for Christmas. Madam President, this shows that when the Prime Minister presented his budget address and he made promises in his budget address, he is delivering on his promises. So what we can see out of this resolution, Madam President, we can simply put it as promises delivered. Thank you.
Senator Polius.
Can I get the podium?
Oh, you know what? I can probably leave it. Leave it.
It's the conditional tense there. It's conditional. Yeah, conditional. It's the conditional. You know what it is. The conditional. Is it?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to place on record my submission based on the resolution to authorize the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of EC to $277 million for budgetary support. However, before I delve into my submission, Madam President, please allow me to convey my deepest condolences to a few families. First of all, the family of our First of all, the family of our loved one, Norbert Williams, a dear friend. We miss him very much. We also want to express our sincere condolences to all those who have and you know, Madam President, it is really sad because I get a bit emotional about this. What is really taking place in our country is something that we all of us, there is nothing to rejoice. Nothing, in fact, no one should be rejoicing because it is something that is plaguing our country at this point. This upsurge in the crime rates, the crime situation. And so the many who have lost their lives prematurely, I want to offer my condolences to the families of these people. I also want to offer sincere condolences to a good friend from the same community where I was born and bred, Zelo Oshaf, very good friend. Thank you for your indulgence, Madam President. Madam President, out of the projected 505 million to finance this first budget, as of today, this government would have borrowed over $400 million, sorry. We recognize the need to borrow, Madam President, because every government borrows. But there is a fundamental difference between a government that borrows substantial amounts and during its tenure exercise prudent fiscal management and can even find the fiscal space to do additional borrowings in the time of crisis, as opposed to a government that borrows exorbitant amounts of money, cannot effectively manage its finances to later find itself in a dark pit. And we will remember the refrain, something happened. Something happened, and we could not borrow. This is the fundamental difference, Madam President. So while I support this resolution in principle, Madam President, I want to urge this government to exercise prudence in its fiscal management and for once and for all, prove to all St. Lucians, not just a selected few, all St. Lucians, and to assure them, to reassure them that they all stand to benefit from the borrowings being authorized today. Madam President, with all the borrowing that has taken place, we want to ask a few questions. What has this government done to protect the people of this country from the escalated price of fuel, cooking gas, electricity, and now bread, Madam President? Bread? Come January 2023, Madam President, the price of bread, as pronounced by the Minister of Commerce, will go up. We understand the plight of the Bakers Association. We understand the plight of the Bakers Association and the need to allow the bakers to make a profit and for their business to remain afloat. We understand that, and we have absolutely no qualms with that. Absolutely none. We know we don't produce. That is, come on. This doesn't make any sense here.
We know very well that we don't produce flour. Given the imminent increase in the price of bread, Madam President, we ask, what provisions are made in this resolution to allay the economic situations of many St. Lucians who are already financially depressed? Madam President, while some of us can boast about being financially sound, there are many and thousands of St. Lucians who have nothing to turn to. Thousands of St. Lucians who have nothing to turn to. During COVID, you know what some of the labor supporters say, Madam President? Sans COVID, tout partout est fermé, pays est fermé, bagay te ka marché, moun pa te ka plewe, mais à présent tout partout ouvert, et puis moun ka plewe. Be on the ground, put your ear on the ground. Yet, Madam President, the Labour Party administration wants these very same people to protect the victory. To protect the victory. Madam President, how can these people, how can our sons and daughters protect the victory on a hungry belly? Well, the leader of government business has indicated that the monies borrowed will be used to address some of the commitments made during the election campaign. And I'm happy to hear that. And does that include 100 or 1,500? Does that include the 1,500? And is it all about protecting the victory? Madam President, how can this Labour government ask the people of St. Lucia to protect its victory when there are many who are not of the fold? All they experience is rejection. All they experience is victimization, something that this Labour Party started in 1997. Un bas gouvernement les bas, pièce flambeau pa ka manger. This is the refrain heard in many parts of this.
Senator Polius, kind of giving you some guidance here that we are speaking to the resolution of the borrowing. You have strayed into victimization during the Labour Party, and I think I would need you to come back to the resolution that's on the table and before us.
Thank you, Madam President. But everything that I have to present today, Madam President, is linked to the very resolution that is being tabled today. Madam President, there is so much that has been said in this honorable chambers today. So much has been said in this chamber today. And sometimes I ask myself whether it is a way to, or a method, a tactic to distract St. Lucians from the real problem. Madam President, this country is bleeding profusely, and that numerous families are mourning and groaning. And now that we have seen the collapse of the banana industry, tourism, which is our major income earner, our major source of income, is being seriously threatened. Madam President, visitors, I don't think visitors will be willing to visit our shores, having knowledge of all the criminal activities, criminal acts taking place in this country. Madam President, out of the amount being borrowed today, how much will be used to go after the facilitators of crime? Those who do not commit the crimes themselves, but lure others into committing those crimes. So while, Madam President, it is all fine to fulfill some of the campaign commitments made, there is need to safeguard the lives of the people of St. Lucia. We are rapidly becoming a war zone. We do not feel safe, and this is the real problem that we face in this country at this point in time. This is the problem, major problem. And as the government, the independent senator, indicated, just putting money out there will not solve the problem. We really have to think about and seriously think about those social programs that will help to arrest some of these issues that plague our country. Madam President, I want to urge St. Lucians, all those who are feeling the pinch, all those who are clamoring for better, all those whose livelihoods have been robbed, those who have been rejected, those who are victims of crime, those who have lost their loved ones, all St. Lucians who are so fearful, to focus on protecting their lives and the lives of their family members and loved ones. Madam President, I would really love to wish our sons and daughters of Fair Helen a Merry Christmas. I would love to wish, from the bottom of my heart, I would love to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. But you know what, Madam President? For thousands of St. Lucians, this Christmas will be nothing but a scary, scary Christmas. I thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I hear scary, scary statements. Very scary statements. But I choose instead, Madam President, to focus on the contents of the presentations made today and to provide some measure of response in some ways to some of what was brought before this Senate. Madam President, if I may firstly address the issues raised, or some of them, and there is a common theme that has permeated the Senate in the last 2 or 3 sittings, and I did refer to it in the last sitting, and that is the idea that there are 2 arguments that come to us when there is a motion or a bill from the opposition. One argument is that if the motion or the bill is one that the opposition cannot find fault in, they will, first of all, they will try to find fault in it and say that it's no good. But when it is without, they can't find any fault, then the next step would be to claim it and say we did it first, or it was ours. And Madam President, once again this morning we saw similar pattern. And so we heard, for example, and I wanted to note that because when we were in opposition and this government, the former government, borrowed money, all of the figures were always presented in US dollars. And I remember sitting across and saying to the government, we are our official currency is the Eastern Caribbean dollar. So if you're talking to St. Lucians, why don't you tell them what you're borrowing in EC dollars? We had started to sound like an American state. So the figures were being quoted in US dollars, and sometimes US dollars was not even mentioned. You just say the government seeks to borrow $800,000, and you would think it was 800,000 EC. But I'm happy to note that the current opposition has now remembered the importance, or noted the importance of using the EC dollars. So in his deliberations, the leader of government business, for instance, ensured that every time he quoted the millions, he made sure he quoted them in EC dollars. So, you know, a lot can be learned over a period of 1 year. Opposition can teach us a lot. Madam President, I noted a huge library being brought up this morning, and the library thing is becoming another pattern in the Senate. The last sitting, the leader of opposition business, who again, and if you follow all of my presentations, Madam President, every time I stand to rebut, I always have to indicate to the Senate that the leader of opposition business is not in his chair. And again, there it is. I hope he can be back while I'm speaking, or trying to respond to him, or maybe I should postpone my response to him until he's back. Madam President, a library. The last sitting, the leader of opposition business started bringing up a discussion, quoting a source, that was the Social and Economic Review, when Senator Jean and some of us, as we say in Creole, boucher him, he decided that he was going to use a different source and went downstairs and came back with a sheet of paper from the estimates. And even that did not suffice. So this morning, he comes with an entire library, estimates and a whole host of props. Now, as a teacher, if I was going to a class, I would say that these were my teaching aids. And if I was being assessed as a teacher, many of us here have taught, so we know what it means. If I assessed a teacher who came to class with all those props and didn't use them, I would probably have not given them a very good grade. So here he comes with his entire library, but I noted in his entire presentation, and he used almost all of his time, he used a piece of paper in his hand that had a few notes jotted that were taken from the estimates of expenditure. All of his library remained there. And perhaps, Madam President, it was just irrelevant, and a whole charade of props that, well, we used to have renderings, now it's props in the Senate. Props that are never used and are not relevant to the debate, so they sit on the desk, and, well, he's not my size, so I don't know, probably stronger that he can carry it back. But, Madam President, this is an example of what has been happening. This Senate is being taken as a playground. People just come and charade and do not add substance to the debate. Madam President, the argument of 505, there was a 545 that didn't capture anything and gave the government 15-2, 545. So now it's 505, and 505 started as what we had borrowed. Now it is what we intend to borrow. And he's coming back to seek redemption, Madam President. But it's not going to happen, because as long as we are in the Senate, we will continue to refute any attempt to mislead this House, the Senate. Madam President, an argument was raised regarding changing policies. When I made my presentation to explain the motion, I did indicate correctly that most of the spending that this borrowing will be used for is to deal with expenses that were incurred by the last government. And the leader of opposition business attempted a vain attempt to try to challenge this. And I know that happened with the presentation of Senator Jean, and I don't wish to go back to it for too long, Madam President. But I have to say to the Senate that the context that was used to try to make it seem that this Labour Party government could have changed policies to cut down on the need to borrow is a flawed argument. Because The senator could have chosen any example he needed to, but he chose to use the Sulphur Springs project, the census, the Mocha housing, and when he mentioned the Mocha housing project, across the table, I hinted to my learned colleague, Senator Stanislas, that if that happened, he would not have liked it. I said across the table, if the Labour Party had cancelled the intention or not honored the intention to take care of the Mocha development, the honorable senator who is from Soufriere would not have supported that. And so the census argument was then brought up. I'm happy to welcome him back, Madam President. The census argument would not have been brought up. And to then come back and try to give an explanation for it, he could have chosen several other examples of policies and programs that our government could have cancelled. He chose to use the census as an example. And so we had no choice, and now I have no choice in my rebuttal, but to respond to the point that he made about the census.
Madam President,
and I
rise on a point of order, please. Again,
what is your point
members on the opposite side. Sorry?
May I ask you what is your point of order?
Madam President, the member is clearly and deliberately misleading the House. Now, by suggesting that I went specifically for the census, I clearly outlined, and I re-emphasize, I quoted the Prime Minister, who said he came to the House 7 times to borrow. The census was one of 4
senators,
areas.
We cannot have 2 senators standing at the same time.
The census was one of 4 areas where the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance said that he borrowed. So the census, the COVID, the Canadian Clean Energy Project. And I outlined all the figures for you. Then he went on to the new debt of the Labour Party. Now, it is in that context I'm saying to you, and I'm saying to the Senate, through you, Madam President, that if the previous administration believed that the 21.6 million for the census, 36.4 million for COVID, 20.2 million for the Canadian Clean Energy Project or the geothermal project, if you believe that those are bad loans, it is within your purview and you have the powers to cancel those debts. But if you are going to endorse them...
Thank you. And this is rebuttal time. You have clarified what you said. I would ask Senator to proceed.
Madam President, thank you. I will obey your instructions and move on. But I actually have not even said anything about the census. I just mentioned the word. That's all I have to say. The member was not in the chamber, and as soon as he walked in, I mentioned the word. I haven't said anything about census, Madam President. To be fair to me, I haven't. And the member in anticipation. So I don't know how I can be called upon on a point of order if I haven't said anything. I haven't said anything about, I just used the word. So he walks into the Senate, as usual, walks out and walks in, hears a word, and jumps up on a point of order when I haven't even said anything. But Madam President, as an experienced teacher, you know how to catch your students. They are what you call prompt words. You just say the word and you get the reaction and you know. So he was caught in that trap, Madam President. I said census and he jumped up. It was he who spoke about census. I haven't said anything but just the word. So Madam President, you have ruled, I will move on, but all I said was census. Madam President, of all the expressions and the examples and the deliberations that the leader of opposition business referenced in his presentation, one of my favorite comments or my favorite statements that he made this morning was captured in 2 words. And I think all of us gave him a resounding applause when he said, flambeau debt. I think this is exactly, that encapsulates exactly what this borrowing is about. I think he, I must give him credit. Credit must be given where it's due. He has done a tremendous job in helping us capture a summary of what this is about. So we are here this morning, Madam President, unfortunately, to deal with flambeau debt. And I hope he cannot rise on a point of order and said I misquoted him, because he did say flambeau debt. So I want to applaud him for reminding this country and the Senate that the reason we are here today to borrow that amount of money is predominantly to deal with what he has captured as flambeau debt. So thank you, Madam Senator. Madam President, I think the issue of DFCs was properly explained by Senator Jean, so I don't want to focus too much on it in the interest of time. But one thing I'll say, Madam President, is that the DFCs we spoke about, which primarily were roads, as the Senator mentioned, most of these payables, most of these loans, or as we say, l'argent ou doit moun, l'argent moun travaille pour, quoi dit ou pour quoi dire pour payer. Madame Présidente, tout ce quoi dit ça là, presque tout ce quoi dit ça là, nous partons au gouvernement, c'est Mamay Flambeau qui te joignent tous ces contrats ça là pour faire chimé car les pièces côté et puis à présent nous n'y pour venir au gouvernement et puis payer Mamay Flambeau dette Flambeau. That's what it is. Madam President, so the point is, these DFCs that we are now borrowing money to pay, the people who and if you have to apply the doctrine, we would have known that most of these people who did those DFCs are supporters of the previous government who got these contracts, worked, and now they're expecting their payments. And as a responsible government, we're not going to say, Usema mai flabo no pa ka paye. We are going to pay them what is due to them. So I really want to thank the leader of opposition business for really uncovering some of the things that, you know, when you try to go after people, you have to be very careful that you're not exposed, you know. When you point one finger this way, you know, you have about 4 pointing towards you. So you have to be very careful. Madam President, I don't want to spend the entire rebuttal on one specific set of responses, but I cannot let some of those things go. Madam President, there was an attempt to raise a comparison between the terms of borrowing by this government from the Taiwanese and the former government's borrowing from the Taiwanese, and making a comparison between the terms, you know, and the terms that are used, almost to suggest that it was a model that the UWP used that we are using. Madam President, I will get to that when we look at debt refinancing. But I'll say to the Senate now that when $175 million was borrowed, or was supposed to have been borrowed, that money would have been spent on a project where a direct award, and I want members to follow me very carefully, a direct award was issued to a single company, a single individual, a single entity, rather, to do one project, a single project, an airport development that had already been commissioned, had already been identified to be done under a public-private partnership that would put zero debt on our books. So, Madam President, let us compare that. Since they were trying to compare, let us compare a single project via direct award, 175 million. Can somebody do the math for me, please? Because now we're giving figures in EC dollars. 175 million US. Please do the math for me. 175 million US in one go to be borrowed for a single project, and a single entity will enjoy the benefits of that money. 475 million EC. Almost $500 million EC. He stood up and talked about a quarter
Madam
million.
President, I am really sorry to be interrupting I don't want to interrupt the members'
Madam President.
Senator Fede, this is rebuttal time.
I rise in a point of order, Madam President.
No, I'm sorry. If this is something that you had said and he's just quoted you, then you can stand on a point of order to clarify. This is not time, he's not making a presentation, he's rebutting. I am sorry, you will have to take your seat.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, you see, I know it's good to keep fit. Exercising is good, but anyway. Madam President, I was making a comparison based on a point that the senator raised. He was comparing the terms of our government's borrowing from the Taiwanese to their government. And I am saying to the Senate that his government proposed to borrow a much more significant sum. He was talking about, a while ago I listened to him, $250 million. It sounded sensational. But I am saying $500 million almost for a single project, and one entity was granted a direct award. Madam President, do you know that what we have come to borrow here, is going to be a lot less money, but look at the spread of the various beneficiaries from that borrowing. And I don't want to go back through the long list. All of the entities that we have identified that are going to benefit, including social programs, which was a suggestion made. So which one can you really compare and say are better tools? But let's move on, Madam President. And so I go to the issue of 505. So now it's I don't know what the obsession of the opposition is with the number 5. It did not help them. They tried 5 to stay alive. It got away. They come back with 545. People kick that away. Now it's 505. It's always a 5. And then it was 1,005. Now it's not 1,005. So I don't know what the 5 thing. And they got 2. All I'll say is 15-2. There's a 5 in there. Madam President, the senator also attempted to, let's get back to very serious business. The senator attempted to tell the Senate that the 505, the 505 that he now has said is not we have borrowed but we propose to borrow, is the highest that would have been borrowed within that period. But then Senator Jean, in her response, stood up using the very same source, indicating that in the 2020-21 budget, 601 million was cited to be proposed to be borrowed. And then the 509 million that he stood about 4 times on a point of order, failing to refute. So these figures would have shown that his submission or his suggestion that the 505 was unprecedented and was record numbers is again not factual. Because we all know that 601 is greater than 505 and 509 is greater than 505. So what is this? So let me move on, Madam President. Now to debt reprofiling. In my presentation, I did indicate that debt reprofiling is one of the strategies that the government is using to provide us with some fiscal space and to save about $40 million. But you know what he does? Because everybody knows that debt reprofiling is a very efficient and effective strategy, so he can't say it's bad. So he uses the old trick. We did it first. It was our strategy. We started it. Madam President, governments upon governments, both UWP and Labour Party, from when I was a boy, have been doing debt reprofiling. Governments before I was born have been doing debt reprofiling. So what is this thing that is making it so novel and so unique that that he wants to claim? We know that debt reprofiling is a strategy. I'm no economist, but it's been done before I was born. Madam President, let me move to some of the comments raised by Senator Aziz. I want to commend him in his absence that the $100 million Christmas present that he made reference to is a very good way of putting this into context. So I thank him for making that observation, especially since he's part of he's positioned in a very critical and strategic industry that rarely brings in the revenue, which is the tourism industry. So he would understand what that means. And that also that this money is also going to be used to support other policies. You see, when we come to this Senate or to the House, whatever we do, the policies are not all over the place. They are synchronized. They have a relationship. And I think it even takes somebody standing from the outside looking in to see that some of these policies and pieces of legislation that we have passed, they are connected. And I will cite three of them. The community tourism idea, the blue economy, the youth economy. All of these are related to what Senator Aziz was referring to. And I think it is very clearly that our policies and our borrowing and our initiatives all are aligned and there is cohesion in what we're doing. And the only way you can achieve that, Madam President, is if you have leadership that is prudent and competent. Madam President, the Senator also commended the Prime Minister for his ability to he used the term hold off. And that is true. Our Prime Minister, Philip Joseph Pierre, was able, despite all that we have inherited, and I have just explained, all the debt that we have inherited, was able to hold off for a significantly long period of time, almost a year or a year plus, without having to go and do that kind of borrowing. And so what he was able to do is to allow the economy manage what was there, to cut down on expenditure, not traveling business class all over the place. You know me, I've had to sit in a plane for several hours. Economy. When people were spending millions, thousands in, these are the kinds of decisions that we have taken, not going on every trip that is offered. In the Ministry of Tourism, where I am involved, Madam President, if you have to go on all the trips that you have that been offered, you won't have time to stay at work. We have decided that we are cutting down on these expenses from government so that we cannot incur further debt on the people. Madam President, so when the Prime Minister was able to hold off for so long without adding debt to the books, you see the opposition pretends as if they didn't know that. But I'm happy somebody who is not part of this side can see it. Madam President, the hands up versus the handing out, the handing up versus the handing out point was well placed. And I think a lot of the policies that we have implemented seem to be suggesting that we want to give people a hand up. Empower them. Give them some support. And I don't want to go into all of the various examples, but I'm using only one, the Small Business and Micro Enterprise Bill, for example, where we are basically offering small businesses an opportunity to get started, and those who are started an opportunity to get better. We're holding their hands and we're helping them along. We're not just dishing out things as if people are helpless and we are creating dependency. No, we're not doing that. So I think that was a well-placed comment. And finally, from the comments of Senator Aziz, he made a very important point that there is potential in what we've borrowed to be able to use some of those resources to help alleviate crime. And I think Senator Lee also made reference to that, and I want to associate and agree with that. I think that every opportunity is being given in addition to what we have already done, and there's a list of them I can refer to as far as the issue on crime. Permit me, Madam President, to use these examples. The Northern Divisional Police Station, or the divisional headquarters in Grosley. The signing of the contract for extending the repairs on the Beaufort Police Station, the purchasing of the 19 vehicles and continuing to give the police the ability to be mobile, the Firearms Act that we passed earlier this year, Madam President, the allowing operational independence to the police High Commissioner and the High Command of the police, not interfering in their work, the recruiting of additional special police constables. This is something that is necessary. We need more hands on deck. Madam President, provision of Customs Department with improved equipment for detection of guns. That is critical. And we know that we have been very concerned about the influx of guns into this country. The expanding and protecting, expanded protection with the newly enacted domestic violence bill. You know, that is one of the areas of concern. We also have provided a special branch unit with new office accommodation, making it more conducive for them to work. Provision of the enhancing the crime detection capabilities by achieving accreditation at the National Forensic Laboratory. That is critical. That helps us solve crime. And I also want to mention the strengthening of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force vehicle patrol fleet to improve response time. Madam President, these are all initiatives that have been taken by this government in the few months that the leader of opposition business likes to use months. Now, you're not using years, you use months to make it sound like they are, we've been in for so long, 16 months and months, And I'm saying in response to senators is that the initiatives that we have started, we believe that it's important that we continue and strengthen our capability and help towards alleviating the crime situation. Madam President, if I can now quickly move to, more specifically to Senator Lee, he did make a point that debt comes due always. I think that was these were his exact words. Yeah? Debt comes due always? Yeah, the bills. Yeah, they come. When the bills are due, you have to pay them, essentially. And that's a reality that we cannot run away from. And the issue of land acquisition, there's a significant difference in what happened with our government and what happens with the AWP. There was this reward and punishment issue. I will not name anyone. I am not in the business of doing that. But the example I used from Lacoville, where the gentleman's property, his family property was acquired, and it took 12 years almost for us to come in and decide that he needs to get paid. I can recall in the last dispensation a particular well-known, well-to-do person who was part of a board who was able to receive compensation for land that was acquired from them while this gentleman from Lacoville was waiting. So it seems that the observation Senator Lee made has merit in that some people can be rewarded because they went broke and government can acquire property for them and pay them right away, while other people languish for years and government has taken their property and they can't get paid. So I don't know if Senator Lee was a guy there, but he seemed to have some insight when he made that point. So, Madam President, I am happy that we are taking care of land acquisition. Social interventions, I agree. I think these are critical. We can understand the relationship between socioeconomic circumstances and crime. And I welcome that suggestion, and I assure the Senator that these will be in the priority areas as to where some of these monies will go. And of course, reducing the perceived inequalities. That's a very, very essential point. The sociologists will tell you that if people live in an environment where they believe that they're not getting equal share of the pie, they will turn on those that they believe are getting unjust rewards. And that is something that we need to reduce. There has been no 5-year period in my lifetime that I have seen greater social inequity been practiced and encouraged than the last 5 years. The gap between the have and the have-nots was just being stretched, taking from those who don't have and enriching those who have. Everybody in St. Lucia was able to relate to that, and they could see it. We are going to cut that gap and stop those social inequalities. Finally, Madam President, Senator Jean captured very eloquently the basic objective of this motion, and that is for this government to deliver on the promises that it made to its people, to our people. But just to mention, Senator Polius, of course, sticking to the script very well. 505, she came back, 505. And she did make a couple of observations about the price of bread. I don't want to go too much into that because I think we have addressed, with all the subsidies that we have been able to give, how we have subsidized bread, subsidized fuel, subsidized all kinds of things to bring relief to people. The collapse of the banana industry, Madam President, I heard Senator Polius, who I know is from a banana belt, just like myself, and I appreciate she always has a concern about this, to suggest the collapse of the banana industry? Madam President, has she forgotten under whose government Winfresh collapsed and went bankrupt? Madam President, has she forgotten? Madam President, that is all I'm going to say. I will end, Madam President, on a point. I would love to be within silence. I seek your protection, Madam President. Thank you. Madam President, I will end on a point, on a statement that was made by Senator Polius. You see, sometimes that's the beauty of being part of a debate. The opposition, sometimes what they do is that they arm you. They give you ammunition you didn't have. They give you strength that you didn't even know you had because of what they say. So let me just end with a point that was made by Senator Polius. She said, and if I don't quote her properly, welcome to be corrected, that in the context of explaining why we should be prudent in the borrowing, that if something were to happen, you know, her government had been so prudent that if something were to happen, they would have been able to borrow. But if the way we are going, if something were to happen, that we would not be able to borrow. Madam President, all I'm going to say in response to end is that by God's grace, in this tenure, in this 5-year term of our government, of this government, God forbid, the only thing that can happen that will put us in a position where we can't borrow or borrowing can't be done, the only thing that can happen, God forbid, is the UWP. That's the only thing that can happen, that can cause this country to be in a position where it cannot borrow. So I'll repeat that, Madam President. The only thing that can happen for this country to be in a position where it cannot borrow is the UWP. On that note, Madam President, I thank everybody who has contributed. And by God's grace, He loves this country as much as we do, and He's not going to let that happen. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of US $102,128,294 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Be it further resolved that the loan is repayable in 20 years commencing from the date of first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. B, the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date the first advance under the loan is made, by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. C. Interest is payable at a rate of the 6-month Chicago Mercantile Exchange Term Secured Overnight Financing Rate plus 0.2% and 1.25% per annum. And D. If the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,277, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,261. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bills. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President.
Before you proceed, Senator, Leader of Government Business, may I advise senators, as according to Standing Order 8.1, quorum of the Senate and Committee of the whole Senate shall consist of 6 senators, plus myself, the presiding officer. I want you to be advised accordingly. Thank you. Proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I think we do have a quorum. Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Virtual Asset Business.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I want to establish, and this bill is pretty much straightforward, so I'm hoping that we can get through within reasonable time. I want to just establish the objective of this bill as really to modernize the environment within which we do business and within which doing business exists, especially in these times. Madam President, we are very familiar with, especially since COVID, the way the world is moving, digitization, e-commerce, and we have to put in the necessary legislation and infrastructure to be able to operate within that environment. And so our country needs to not be left behind, and we need to get on with it. The bill seeks to also strengthen the legislative framework for facilitating virtual aspects or virtual assets businesses. In creating that environment, Madam President, there are certain things that we will have to confront and we'll have to consider. For example, the use of cryptocurrency, blitz coins, blockchain, technology which is increasingly being used as part of a payment system or payment product, operating virtual asset businesses in our country. These are all realities that we face in the 21st century, and we have to be, as we say, moving with the times. We have to be compliant with some of the expectations. Now, Madam President, every time you operate within certain context, you also have to ensure that there are you put in certain mechanisms to make sure that things are happening properly. Because as in everything else, once something new is going to be introduced, there will always be loopholes and people will probably have to be guarded, so there have to be regulations. And so there is also need for us to put in those types of controls. Like other businesses, Madam President, the virtual assets business has to be, as I said, regulated. And in doing so, there has to be, an example I will cite is, for example, Section 5 of the Act, where a license has to be obtained. So you have to apply for a license. You can't just get into this business by just saying you operate in virtual assets. You have to have some measure of authenticity and some measure of legitimacy. So you will have to obtain a license. There is a time frame as well for applying. For the license, I think it is a 30-day period, and that is referenced in clause 14 of the bill. Madam President, it's also important that the entities who desire to use this type of business have an office, they have a space, somewhere that they can operate. We know with virtual businesses, people tend to just be on their computers, but it's important that you establish that there is actually an office within which you operate. Madam President, it also requires that a percentage of the finances generated are in an escrow account, again, for purposes of meeting those standards and accountability. Madam President, as with any other business, there are compliance issues, and the regulations have to also be in place to help prevent such things as money laundering. Even with regular businesses, we know that there's always the possibility or tendency for money laundering to occur. And when it comes to virtual assets, that is no exception. So there has to be mechanisms in place to reduce the possibility of that. And also, in doing so, being able to protect the assets of the people who wish to invest in these types of businesses. It's not only for the persons who have the business, but there are also opportunities for persons to invest, and you have to protect their investments by having regulations. So the virtual assets bill, I think it has a total of about 23 or 26 various sections and clauses, and what it seeks to do is really, in a nutshell, to ensure that we can operate within that virtual asset space as a country, and that we do so and ensure that all the necessary regulations and guidelines are in place to allow for that to happen. And so, with that brief explanation, Madam President, I wish to present this bill for the concurrence and support of the Senate.
Senators, the question is that the virtual asset business bill be read a second time. Senator Fady.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just want to make a brief comment on the presentation of this bill, which is coming many years late into the whole industry of virtual asset. Madam President, I'm sure that you would have heard about Bitcoin and other digital currency, which would have been in existence for many years. I've always held the view, Madam President, that the Caribbean, the countries of the Caribbean, have missed a great opportunity to advance their economies in this sector, and have been somewhat overly conservative in plunging ahead and making sure that they create the necessary legislative environment for the Caribbean to advance and to profit from this industry. I note with much interest how states like Wyoming and Delaware have taken a very proactive effort in ensuring that they become the hub of digital currency, for example, within the whole construct of the United States. Now, why this is significant and why we could learn from this is because these are two of the smallest states in the U.S. And while they may have a very good reputation for banking and low taxation and international business corporations, they are by no means one of the powerhouses. It's not California or New York, but they're very small jurisdictions, and they have taken the proactive decision to ensure that they set up the necessary infrastructure so that they can create opportunity for their citizens and to diversify their economies in a way that we could have learned from in the Caribbean. As we speak of economic diversification, I think that this is a very big opportunity for us to do so and to make sure that we create this enabling environment for small businesses and for more of our citizens to get involved, and to also attract foreign investors who may want to use St. Lucia or the Caribbean as a jurisdiction. I know that the ECCB, they have been on public record of being extremely cautious against the advancement of digital currencies, as an example. I know that the bill that we are discussing here today has to do with virtual assets, but it's all linked because one of the fastest growing areas of virtual assets would be in the digital currency area. The governor of the central bank must feel extremely justified by recent developments within that sector, where we see that there's a proliferation of scamming or fraudulent activities that have taken place within that sector, and has placed that industry or to create a lot of trepidation and fear and uncertainty about the industry. But I think that what needs to happen is that the Caribbean, entering into this sector quite late, should actually learn from these lessons and try to, in its own way, try to see how it could create a legislative framework that can rectify the challenges there. But I think it remains an area that the Caribbean can continue to explore for economic and social development of its people. I think that we are certainly overly conservative in the area of digital currency, which remains a big and strong interest of mine. And I would certainly like to see us being a lot more dynamic in this space so that we can create opportunities. A lot of our young people are involved in this sector, and they are dealing with other jurisdictions that have made it possible for them to do so. And I think that the level of interest and enthusiasm by young, aspiring, as well as existing entrepreneurs is more than we can imagine. This space is a growing space in St. Lucia and presents a great opportunity for us to diversify and advance our economy. So with these few comments, Madam President, I want to say that the bill before us, which is a bill generated by the ECCB, it's good that this government is bringing it to the Parliament so that we can deliberate over it and to see its eventual passage. But it's a step in the right direction. But I think that because of how cautious we have been in the region, I think we would have missed a lot of opportunities in this sector, which have really something that's going on for many, many years now. And this late entrance, I just wonder how many opportunities have we missed, and how far we could have gone had we been a lot more dynamic, imaginative, and bold and fearless to ensure that we enter into that sector. So these are my few cents on this, Madam President. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business, any final comments?
Madam President, just to thank the Leader of Opposition Business for recognizing that this is a very progressive step, and that if anybody missed the opportunity and came late, couldn't be us. This is in the first quarter of our term in office, and we've seized the opportunity. And that's all I will say on this, Madam President. So thank you very much.
Senators, the question is that the Virtual Asset Business Bill be read a third time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Beg your pardon. Senators, the question is that the Virtual Asset Business Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
an act to provide for the regulation and supervision of a virtual asset business in or from St. Lucia and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Application.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Requirement for license.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Application for license.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Grant and refusal of application for license.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Condition for license.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 8.
License and renewal.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 9.
Supervision and revocation of license.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 10.
Registers.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 11.
Appointments and obligations of principal representative.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 12.
Requirements of a licensee.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 13.
Audit and financial statements.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 14.
Prospectus for issue or sale of a virtual asset.
Clause 14 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 15.
Powers of the authority regarding a prospectus.
Clause 15 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 16.
Amendment to a prospectus.
Clause 16 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 17.
General powers of the authority.
Clause 17 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 18.
Fees.
Clause 18 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 19.
General penalty.
Clause 19 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 20.
Civil penalty.
Clause 20 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 21.
Exclusion of liability.
Clause 21 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 22.
Guidelines.
Clause 22 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 23.
Regulations.
Clause 23 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
And Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Virtual Asset Business Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and the Virtual Assets Business Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Virtual Asset Business Bill 2022.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do stand adjourned sine die.
Senators, the question is that this Senate do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
There you have it, the adjournment of the sit-in today, December 8th, of the Upper House, the Senate of St. Lucia. And before the Senate today was the motion for the government or to authorize the Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of US $128,294,000 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023 and also the Virtual Asset Business Bill. So you had a motion and a bill before the House, both going through all the stages. To wind up here, I turn you over to Mr. Gaspar.
Merci Winston. Avec content, je dis fini session à ce Sénat là à ce discussion agrégation jeudi avec c'est plutôt mon pas de c'est répétition mais c'est yo on est venu pour ratifier ça qui était passé en caille consiste mardi avec discussion même quand il était dimanche ça c'est mardi c'est en motion par premier ministre avec ministre des Finances pour prêter 277 millions de dollars pour supporter différents projets comme il était présenté en budget. Ça c'est l'année 2022 ou 2023 avec le Premier ministre dit l'agence a lancé pour faire différents bagages. C'est pour payer servants civils, payer achat et dépenses gouvernement, pour payer aussi dette gouvernementale tenue. Ça c'est en temps passé achat et dette gouvernementale jani par l'argent pour faire chimie avec un achat de bagages comme ça. Et aussi ça c'est pour mieux mentionner aujourd'hui, c'est l'argent pour payer le monde qui sont ça c'est pour compter 5 ici. L'argent ça c'est pour payer puisque ça c'est il a coûté un cher l'argent avec l'argent ça c'est pour payer toutes ces bagages là. Et aussi pour ça c'est terre gouvernemental acheté pour combien de temps qui passé avec c'est mon pour côté jeune pays et aussi plusieurs autres bagages. Alors ça te joint à chaque discussion par entre des allégations mais ça va entre sorti ça c'est façade opposition mais c'est bien bonne discussion aujourd'hui a été très intéressant façade toutes ces mêmes sénateurs c'était ici à aujourd'hui à Venita quand même mais discussion c'était intéressant et puis avec aussi la tenue ça nous a créé un virtual asset business qui en bill et bien en loi 9 qui était passé et bien c'est comme ça nous avons fini la discussion aujourd'hui nous avons dit merci un peu pour rester pour nous avec nous avons vu passer pour studio nous en MTN.